The piercing sound of sirens cut through the night like a banshee's wail. Pounding feet and frantic voices filled the air, but all of that disappeared into a ghostly silence when Malcolm Ward, a seasoned firefighter, found himself staring down the barrel of a police officer's gun. The irony sliced through the chaos: a black hero with a hose, perceived as a threat at the very scene he was risking his life to save. He kept his eyes steady on the officer, whose badge gleamed coldly under the alternating red and white lights of the awaiting fire engines. Malcolm's burnt orange uniform, the reflective stripes standing out amidst the black smoke billowing upwards, marked him as savior, not suspect. Yet fear clouded the officer's judgment. "Hands up! Get down!" The command was barked with a gravity that spoke of both training and ingrained bias. The gun unwaveringly aimed at Malcolm's chest. The officer's hand trembled slightly, a subtle betrayal of the surge of adrenaline coursing through his veins. Malcolm felt the heat of the flames at his back and a lifetime of prejudice stirring within. "Officer, I'm here to help!" Malcolm's voice boomed with authority and desperation. He pointed to the fire truck behind him with a gloved finger, but the officer hardly lowered his weapon. From somewhere nearby there was a child's scream, piercing through the night and momentarily thawing the icy tension. The officer's eyes widened, panic replacing the hard mask of aggression. The commotion around them became distant once more as Malcolm realized the horrifying twist. This house on fire, this chaotic inferno, belonged to the cop himself. Smoke twisted upwards like a living thing, obscuring the stars overhead and filling the space between them with a deadly dance of shadow and light. Every second felt like a lifetime as Malcolm calculated his next move. There on the periphery, his colleagues battled the voracious flames, their silhouettes ghost-like figures fighting a war of elements. Suddenly, the cop's radio crackled to life, reminding both men of the real enemy at hand, the roaring monster consuming his home. "Please," Malcolm said, softer this time, seeing a flicker of humanity in the officer's eyes. "Let me do my job. Your family needs you." It was that piercing line, the suggestion of what mattered most, that caused the officer's resolve to falter, allowing logic, however tenuously, to override fear. The gun wavered for a heartbeat longer before it finally angled toward the ground. Relief sighed out of Malcolm's body, but he tossed not a second more as he sprinted towards the inferno, heart pounding with a mission greater than proving his worth in the face of bias, a mission to save lives. Flames licked at the windows hungrily, the fire a living nightmare consuming dreams with an indiscriminate hunger. Malcolm's mind zeroed in on the technique, the training, blocking out the fresh memory of threat as he joined his crew. Orders, barked in rapid succession, formed a rhythm as each firefighter moved with the practiced precision of a well-rehearsed dance. Hoses snaked across lawns, streams of water arcing into the building as an act of defiance. The digital clock, audibly ticking inside Malcolm's head, reminded him of the precious seconds slipping like sand through an hourglass. Each moment spent here carried a weight, each breath a gamble. Without hesitation, he grabbed his equipment, masking his face against the noxious smoke, and pushed through the door into the fiery embrace, knowing full well that destiny awaited within. Shadows twisted and leaped inside, the heat wrapping around him like a blanket of despair. Yet Malcolm moved with purpose, his instincts finely tuned. Each step was measured, each motion decisive, as he listened for the signs of life that would signal hope amidst this churning hell. There, amidst the cacophony of splintering wood and crackling fire, he heard it again, the cry of a child. It was faint and peppered with coughs, but it was enough to propel him forward into the depths of danger. Outside, the officer stood frozen, watching the house that had once been a sanctuary, now menaced by nature's fury. His gun had found a resting place inside its holster, a forgotten element in a world where the real struggle was being waged against time and fate. Dizziness, confusion. His training had readied him for many situations, but never for this complex tangle of personal tragedy intersecting with human bias. In that birthing place of heroes and victims, Malcolm moved like an unyielding force, pushing through barriers of fear and flame, breaking through the very walls of division to reach the tiny life that was at its heart. He lifted the child into his arms, offering solace against the nightmare around them, and started back through the labyrinth of danger towards the light. Emerging from the smoke-ravaged house, soot and sweat streaking his skin, Malcolm carried with him not just a saved life, but a burning testament to the courage that sees beyond division. As the child gasped the kiss of fresh air outside, the crowd hushed, the silence speaking louder than the roar of traffic and sirens. It was a silence thick with something unnameable, a hope, perhaps, for a world where heroes were judged not by the color of their skin, but by the merit of their deeds. The piercing sound of sirens cut through the night like a banshee's wail. Pounding feet and frantic voices filled the air, but all of that disappeared into a ghostly silence when Malcolm Ward, a seasoned firefighter, found himself staring down the barrel of a police officer's gun. The irony sliced through the chaos. A black hero with a hose, perceived as a threat at the very scene he was risking his life to save. He kept his eyes steady on the officer, whose badge gleamed coldly under the alternating red and white lights of the awaiting fire engines. Malcolm's burnt orange uniform, the reflective stripes standing out amidst the black smoke billowing upwards, marked him as savior, not suspect. Yet fear clouded the officer's judgment. "Hands up, get down!" The command was barked with a gravity that spoke of both training and ingrained bias. The gun unwaveringly aimed at Malcolm's chest. The officer's hand trembled slightly, a subtle betrayal of the surge of adrenaline coursing through his veins. Malcolm felt the heat of the flames at his back and a lifetime of prejudice stirring within. "Officer, I'm here to help." Malcolm's voice boomed with authority and desperation. He pointed to the fire truck behind him with a gloved finger, but the officer hardly lowered his weapon. From somewhere nearby, there was a child's scream, piercing through the night and momentarily thawing the icy tension. The officer's eyes widened, panic replacing the hard mask of aggression. The commotion around them became distant once more as Malcolm realized the horrifying twist. This house on fire, this chaotic inferno, belonged to the cop himself. Smoke twisted upwards like a living thing, obscuring the stars overhead and filling the space between them with a deadly dance of shadow and light. Every second felt like a lifetime as Malcolm calculated his next move. There on the periphery, his colleagues battled the voracious flames, their silhouettes ghost-like figures, fighting a war of elements. Suddenly, the cop's radio crackled to life, reminding both men of the real enemy at hand, the roaring monster consuming his home. "Please," Malcolm said, softer this time, seeing a flicker of humanity in the officer's eyes. "Let me do my job. Your family needs you." It was that piercing line, the suggestion of what mattered most, that caused the officer's resolve to falter, allowing logic, however tenuously, to override fear. The gun wavered for a heartbeat longer before it finally angled toward the ground. Relief sighed out of Malcolm's body, but he tossed not a second more as he sprinted towards the inferno, heart pounding with a mission greater than proving his worth in the face of bias, a mission to save lives. Flames licked at the windows hungrily, the fire a living nightmare consuming dreams with an indiscriminate hunger. Malcolm's mind zeroed in on the technique, the training, blocking out the fresh memory of threat as he joined his crew. Orders barked in rapid succession, formed a rhythm as each firefighter moved with the practiced precision of a well-rehearsed dance. Hoses snaked across lawns, streams of water arcing into the building as an act of defiance. The digital clock audibly ticking inside Malcolm's head reminded him of the precious seconds slipping like sand through an hourglass. Each moment spent here carried a weight, each breath a gamble. Without hesitation, he grabbed his equipment, masking his face against the noxious smoke, and pushed through the door into the fiery embrace, knowing full well that destiny awaited within. Shadows twisted and leaped inside, the heat wrapping around him like a blanket of despair. Yet Malcolm moved with purpose, his instincts finely tuned. Each step was measured, each motion decisive as he listened for the signs of life that would signal hope amidst this churning hell. There, amidst the cacophony of splintering wood and crackling fire, he heard it again, the cry of a child. It was faint and peppered with coughs, but it was enough to propel him forward into the depths of danger. Outside, the officer stood frozen, watching the house that had once been a sanctuary, now menaced by nature's fury. His gun had found a resting place inside its holster, a forgotten element in a world where the real struggle was being waged against time and fate. Dizziness, confusion. His training had readied him for many situations, but never for this complex tangle of personal tragedy intersecting with human bias. In that birthing place of heroes and victims, Malcolm moved like an unyielding force, pushing through barriers of fear and flame, breaking through the very walls of division to reach the tiny life that was at its heart. He lifted the child into his arms, offering solace against the nightmare around them, and started back through the labyrinth of danger towards the light. Emerging from the smoke-ravaged house, soot and sweat streaking his skin, Malcolm carried with him not just a saved life, but a burning testament to the courage that sees beyond division. As the child gasped a kiss of fresh air outside, the crowd hushed, the silence speaking louder than the roar of traffic and sirens. It was a silence thick with something unnameable, a hope, perhaps, for a world where heroes were judged not by the color of their skin, but by the merit of their deeds. The sun was a cold, distant eye in the sky, casting pale light through the office windows the next morning. Even with the early hour, the law firm was abuzz with energy, every corner humming with the work of defending the defenseless. In a room cluttered with papers, coffee mugs, and purpose, Cynthia Nolan was readying herself to champion a cause that was both deeply personal and critically public. Cynthia, a civil rights attorney with fire coursing through her veins and a reputation for shattering glass ceilings, scanned the details of Malcolm's case with a practiced eye. The folder before her was a litany of injustices, each document whispering callous truths about systemic bias. An experienced veteran in the trenches of equality, she was acutely aware of how these stories played out, often as cautionary tales of bravery starkly checked by entrenched discrimination. But this case was different. The blatant act of unwarranted hostility against Malcolm, played out in the glaring light of a literal inferno, was accompanied by a gut-wrenching twist. It had captured the public's imagination, pushing the narrative from local gossip to national conversation, and now presented an opportunity to tilt the scales of justice. Cynthia exhaled, adjusting the cord of her pristine wool blazer, and strode out to meet her team, assembled in the conference room. Around the table sat a diverse group of legal minds, each one chosen because they believed that justice was an action, not an abstract concept. "All right, let's dive in," Cynthia directed, her voice steady and resolute. She tossed the folder into the middle of the table, its contents spilling out like the harsh truths they were intended to unveil. "We have a strong chance here to expose a pattern of racial bias within the law enforcement system. But more than that, this is about setting a precedent that being black isn't a hazard, especially not for our emergency responders." Heads nodded around the table, driven by the weight of her words. Erica, a young associate with a talent for digging up inconvenient truths, flipped open her laptop. "I've already identified several past complaints against the officer involved," she said, her fingers tapping furiously as she spoke. "Excessive force, mostly, but there's a pattern in cases involving black individuals that can't be ignored." Vincent, a seasoned litigator, with precise diction and an unshakable sense of justice, leaned forward. "Public sentiment's on our side this time, Cynthia, and the media is an unwitting ally in painting the broader picture. We need to harness that energy and focus it on policy change." "What's the status on the police chief's response?" "Silence so far," Cynthia replied tersely. "Officially no comment, but sources indicate there's panic behind closed doors. They know their defense is thin." As the conversation revolved around legal strategies, the tension was palpable. This was more than just a case management meeting. It was the formation of a battle strategy to not only exonerate Malcolm and bring justice, but to shake the pillars of a flawed system. Cynthia underlined her next steps on the whiteboard, her thoughts racing ahead. Malcolm's story would draw attention to the myriad others obscured by shadows. It was a chance to begin dismantling the long-standing narrative that had marginalized so many, creating a blueprint for others stuck under the same oppressive heel. Let's focus on getting Malcolm's testimony down in a way that contextualizes his experience with historical patterns, she said, sweeping the room with a glance that demanded commitment. This isn't just about him, it's about what's been happening forever. The truth, jaw-dropping, undeniable, spoken from a platform people can't ignore. With the warm glow of idealism caressing her vision, Cynthia let the details fall into place. This was the moment to demand the unrelinquishing truth, to expose what had been ignored. As the meeting adjourned, she felt the simmering anticipation of a long-overdue reckoning. Hours later, as the firm's elevator doors opened to the bustling downtown corridor, Cynthia's determination was undiluted. She glanced at the posters that had begun appearing on phone poles and store windows, reading, "Heroes shouldn't have to fear the ones sworn to protect." Steeling herself for the work yet to come, she knew Malcolm was on his way over for their first strategy session. A friend first and client second, whose steely resolve had outlasted so many trials, they would prepare to mount a defense that not only inspired allies, but drew battle lines against apathy. The previous night's events had lit the fuse on a societal powder keg. Having witnessed the power of a single truth spoken fearlessly, Cynthia more than understood the peril and prestige that awaited her. They would not back down. As her phone chirped with a message from Malcolm, its screen glowing confirmation he was on his way, she welcomed the clarity of purpose this challenge afforded. She filled her lungs with the cold autumn air, feeling more than ready to push back. This was just one battle, but the echoes of its outcome would resonate for generations. As Malcolm stepped into her office, Cynthia prepared herself to embody the full weight and audacity of anonymous justice that had the power to change the world. Background noises of clattering keys and ringing phones filled the air of the newsroom, creating a chaotic yet oddly rhythmic symphony. The room buzzed like a hive of caffeinated bees, and it was in this frenetic environment that journalist Daphne Reed thrived. Her eyes flicked from tab to tab on her laptop, voraciously consuming every detail of Malcolm's story as it unfolded like a storm over the city skyline. The world was watching, and Daphne intended to capture the story with the gravity it deserved. Her editor, an old hand with a nose for revolutionary beats, had given her the green light to run wild, and she intended to do exactly that. Fitting the facts was the easy part. Building the narrative that would ensure Malcolm's story hit harder than a punch to the gut was where her skills lay. The modern media's thirst for sensation often overshadowed deeper truths, and Daphne was determined not to let this case blend into the noise of everyday outrage. Her fingers danced across the keys as she crafted a headline that cut straight to the heart. "Wrong hero under fire. Racial bias unmasked." There was urgency in the way she approached this piece, a sense of responsibility that transcended the clickbait journalism she despised. For Daphne, Malcolm wasn't just a figure in the tableau of injustice. He was a flag-bearer in the fight against a system tightly woven with prejudice. The headline promised a dramatic surge of empathy and outrage, a combination that could move mountains and shatter indifference. Daphne's phone buzzed with messages and updates, strings of information weaving a complex web of leads. Neighborhood tip-offs, social media boosts, and testimonies from people closer to Malcolm's experience all filtered through her network. She fashioned them into pieces of an incendiary puzzle, knowing the story demanded a voice louder than apathy's whispered rebuttals. As she intensified her investigation, the sure steps of her editor approached. "Daphne, how goes our modern-day crusade?" he asked, a wry smile tugging at his permanent 5 o'clock shadow. "We're on to something big here, Tom," Daphne replied without looking up. "The responses are flooding in. There's anger, sure, but more importantly, there's support. People want to rally around Malcolm, and they want sweeping reform." Tom nodded, spreading a document across her desk. "This one's yours. Make sure it cuts through the noise. We've been hearing rumors about the cop in question. Could be bigger than one case." Daphne's heart quickened at the prospect. A lone incident could spark awareness. A string of them could ignite a revolution. Her pen tapped rhythmically as she planned her angles, knowing every line could amplify the fight for justice. The editorial meeting buzzed with proposal pitches, each department burning with the news of the night's disaster turned touchstone. But it was Daphne's piece that held their collective attention. She waded through the tangles of bias and publicity, maneuvering the narrative through the myriad perspectives that were clamoring for space, to demand a press conference, to get someone on record, to force transparency from stone-like systems. Her article spotlighted the crucial players: Malcolm's reliability, the damning silence from the police department, and the family at the center of the firestorm. Witnesses were emerging. Neighbors and bystanders who had caught glimpses of the confrontation, fueling public outcry and painting a visceral picture of the night that had changed everything. As deadlines loomed, she felt the weight of history combined with the instantaneous nature of modern media. It burned with the ferocity of the fire itself, demanding, intoxicating, and laden with potential for transformative change. The words she penned went beyond reporting. They were a call to arms against injustice cloaked in authority's guise. When the article finally went live, the impact resonated immediately. Social platforms brightened with reposts and commentary, conversations spilling from screen to street, each share a spark in the public consciousness. Malcolm's story became more than a tale of one man's confrontation with law enforcement. It became a rallying cry for unacknowledged heroes everywhere, crushed under the heavy hand of systemic racism. Television channels picked up the trail, broadcasters articulating the injustices with lofty tones that were difficult to ignore. Malcolm's face appeared across screens nationwide, a reluctant hero caught in the swirl of societal realignment. Yet amidst this mass of unwelcome attention, Daphne's meticulous storytelling ensured that the message read loud and clear. Change wasn't just anticipated, it was demanded. By dusk, as she sank back into her chair, worn yet invigorated, Daphne knew she had woven something potent, a story with the power to transcend the fleeting nature of headlines, a testament to standing against the tide of prejudice. In its wake, it left a question hanging heavy in the air, an unspoken challenge to a nation grappling with its own moral compass. How long until heroes need no longer face the barrel of prejudice? As the newsroom settled into the soft rhythm of an autumn evening, Daphne's gaze found the remnants of the day's conversations. One line in particular hung suspended in her mind like a beacon through the smog. Heroes shouldn't have to fear where they are needed most. And with that, an unyielding resolve to capture the battles yet unfought burned quietly within her, ready for what tomorrow would bring. The church hall was bathed in the amber glow of evening light filtering through stained glass windows, casting kaleidoscopic patterns onto the rows of faded wooden pews. It was here, in a place of historic reverence and solemn gatherings, that the community had decided to make their stand. People of all ages, races, and backgrounds filled the space, the chatter of their mingling voices a hopeful melody against the somber undertones of recent events. The scent of coffee and anticipation mingled in the air, electrifying the atmosphere with purpose. The focal point stood Malcolm, flanked by community leaders and activists who had walked alongside him throughout this impromptu journey for justice. He scanned the eager faces before him, some familiar, others unseen until this battle had pulled them together, and felt the steady wash of gratitude for their solidarity. It was a diverse quilt of humanity, stitched together by shared outrage and a yearning for change. Carol Washington, a lifelong activist with lines of wisdom etched into her face, took the podium first. She was a firebrand with a directness that demanded attention and garnered respect. Her voice, steady and rich, echoed off the vaulted ceiling, drawing the crowd into silence. "We are gathered here not because of one man's experience, but because his story represents many," Carol began, gesturing toward Malcolm, who nodded in acknowledgement. "Racial injustice has long been the elephant in the room, the specter in our institutions, whispering lies into the ears of those who should be allies. Applause mixed with murmurs of agreement rippled through the hall. Carol's speech painted a vivid mural of untold stories and the tireless pursuit of equity. She spoke of haunted histories, of the fire Malcolm faced both physically and psychically, a conflagration serving to expose the kindling that lay beneath the surface of their society. Next, Xavier Thomas, a local youth leader who had harnessed social media to rally thousands, stood to speak. His youthful enthusiasm was infectious, his stance confident as he outlined the importance of their movement. "This is our moment to not just demand change, but to execute it," Xavier declared, his fists clenched with determination. "We need reforms, transparency, and accountability. We need our voices not just heard, but heeded." The crowd roared its agreement, the energy crackling between them, urgent and unapologetic. It was a symphony of voices breaking the silence that had too long veiled their plea for justice. Malcolm stepped forward, his heart pounding with a mixed vigor of righteousness and vulnerability. The room quieted, eyes on him expectantly. He was no longer just a victim. He was a symbol of resilience against systemic change. "I stand here humbled by your support, awed by your resolve," Malcolm said, his voice resonating over the expectant quiet. "This experience isn't just mine. It's a shared one, reflected back from faces across this country. It's high time we ensure those who swear to protect us are held to that promise." A chorus of agreement blossomed once more, and Malcolm felt the reality of their collective power. This gathering wasn't just a reactive assembly. It was an active declaration of intent, a forthright commitment to progress. He could see it across faces, hear it in their cheers, feel it in the energy that was building a bridge from despair to determination. The evening wore on with testimonies, plans, and strategizing. The focus both on immediate action and building a future where such gatherings would be unnecessary. Community leaders outlined steps to hold public discussions with law enforcement, push for legislative change, and provide better training for officers to prevent racial profiling. Together, Daphne concluded with passion, having joined at the behest of both ally and allyship, we're going to shift the tides. We're going to make Malcolm's story the pivot point that turns potential energy into kinetic change. As they closed with a unifying hymn, hands were held and spirits surged. It wasn't just the notes floating upwards. It was a promise carried on the breath of everyone present, inextricably intertwined with Malcolm's story. The unity here would spill out into the streets, into conversations, into the marrow of the town, reaching far beyond this place of worship. When the last echoes of song faded into the night, the hall buzzed with a tangible determination. People flowed out into the cool evening air, scattering like seeds carried on the hope of change. As they stood together under the wide, starry sky, Malcolm felt the transformative power of tenacity and unwavering community. Here, in this moment, they were embarking on a journey collectively, committed to the long road ahead. It was ever uphill, amid storms of dissent, but their footing was sure, marching step by step on the path to a just and equitable society. In a cramped but cluttered office lit by the dull glow of fluorescent lights, Investigator Wyatt Stevens pored over files stacked high on his desk. Coffee-stained papers were interspersed with folders, each one bulging with faded reports and testimonies long forgotten in the archives of bureaucracy. The air in the room was heavy with dust, the scent of neglected justice clinging to the year's worth of paper. Wyatt, a veteran investigator with a keen eye for details others might overlook, had been tasked with conducting an inquiry into the cop involved in Malcolm's incident. Rumors had swirled about the officer's dubious track record, and now it lay upon his shoulders to uncover the truth hidden beneath layers of official indifference. The hum of the office air conditioning was a gentle backdrop to the steady rhythm of Wyatt's work. His method was meticulous, examining each complaint, each marked infraction like pieces of a complex mosaic, all forming a disturbing image. It wasn't the work of a hero, but of someone who understood the sheer volume of indifference embedded within the walls of legality. His eyes skimmed over dates, incidents marked with red tape, more than a few labeled closed due to insufficient evidence. Names of complainants flitted through pages like memories whispered into oblivion. Each entry a potential story that had been silenced, burrowed under the weight of official excuses and delay tactics. Wyatt paused over one particular file, the details reading out like a glaring signpost. It was a complaint filed by a black man nearly 5 years ago, a case involving excessive force at a traffic stop that ended with the victim hospitalized. As he scanned the report, the familiar name of the officer surfaced: Stephen Barrett, the same gun-wielding officer from the Firefighter incident. The pattern was stark, blatant even. Yet these early accusations had withered without consequence. As Wyatt delved deeper, each file spoke the same unsettling language, a history of unchecked aggression and misconduct, buried within administrative silence. He drove his pen across the legal pad, jotting down connections, dotting I's and crossing T's of a damning narrative. A knock on the door interrupted his work, and his assistant, Clara, entered carrying a fresh stack of files. Her eyes were knowing, reflecting the same determined weariness that simmered beneath Wyatt's quiet demeanor. "More reports," she said, placing them on his desk with a light touch. "At this rate, we're going to need a bigger room." "And longer hours," Wyatt replied wryly, though the gravity of their task weighed heavily on each syllable. He took one of the folders, flipping it open to see a familiar story unfold. A young black man harassed without cause. The resolution vague, incomplete. "How did this stay under wraps for so long?" Clara asked, incredulity coloring her tone as she scanned another file. "You'd think after a single incident someone would have noticed the pattern." Wyatt shook his head, the frustration mirrored in the hard set of his jaw. "It's the system, Clara. Designed to protect its own. Complainants get lost in the mire, and any pushback is quieted or ignored." Their eyes met, a mutual understanding of the uphill challenge they faced, unspoken but palpable. Each step toward uncovering these truths meant pushing back against a societal structure determined to maintain the status quo. "Keep digging," Wyatt instructed, pulling another folder from the teetering pile. "We need this investigation airtight. Evidence laid bare so no one can look away." Hours passed, the sun sinking low until only streaks of hazy twilight filtered through the dusty blinds. Wyatt's fingers continued their steady work, documenting each instance of misconduct with the precision of an archivist unearthing history's hidden narrative. The map he was sketching revealed a journey of unchecked power and privilege, the consequences scattered across lives marred by inequality. In what seemed like the dead hours of night, Wyatt leaned back in his chair, studying the evidence he had amassed. It was a complicated tableau, irreducible to newspaper headlines or administrative memos, but it was nonetheless a clear indictment of a singular truth. Where there was smoke, there was fire, and this investigation was only just beginning to uncover its source. Here in this dimly lit office, amidst shelves of ignored accounts and silenced accusations, Wyatt felt the enormity of his undertaking. This wasn't just about legwork and paper trails. It was about uncovering the ingrained biases that infected institutions meant to uphold justice. As he scrutinized the final page before him, the skeletal outline of change began to emerge from the shadows, determined to claim the morning light. The truth no longer lingered in obscurity. It had found a voice, and Wyatt intended to see it speak loudly. As the clock ticked towards the dawn of another day, the undercurrents pulsed with potential, an unshakable testament to the alchemy of determination and hope. Justice, though often delayed, would not be denied. The city square had transformed into a vibrant tapestry of protest and unity, pulsing with the rhythmic cadence of marching feet. The gathering was a significant display of collective will, people streaming in from all quarters to lend their voices to the clarion call for justice. Malcolm's story had struck a chord, resonating far and beyond the confines of their community, illuminating injustices too long ignored. The air held a crispness that invigorated the soul. The signs held aloft by protesters, swaying gently like sails taking the wind. Bright colors and bold letters stated their message with clarity and resolve. Justice for Malcolm, end racial bias, and accountability now. The mass of humanity gathered here represented the spectrum of a just society, demanding to be heard, demanding change. Malcolm stood at the heart of this movement. Though he yearned for the ordinary anonymity that had shaped his life before, his presence, lit by both reluctance and a sense of duty, was energizing the crowd, an emblem of resilience amidst adversity. Encircled by allies, journalists, and citizens ignited by righteous anger, he felt the power of their shared purpose sinking into the bones of this very city. Banners rippled like waves against the tides of indifference, each face in the throng affirming their stand against the injustices that had been so methodically unveiled. The atmosphere was saturated with a mix of determination and defiance, a bold testament that this was not simply a protest. It was a proclamation. Xavier Thomas, his voice amplified by a megaphone, called for attention, his words threading through the gathering like a binding cord. "Today we aren't just here for Malcolm," he declared, echoing through the crowd who had become all too familiar with his passionate oratory. "We're here for every single person who's been silenced by systemic oppression, for every injustice swept under the rug. This ends now." The rallying cry was greeted with cheers that rose toward the sky, an undulating wave of sound that carried with it the weight of their steadfast resolve. Malcolm felt the vibrations, a synchronous energy shared with those around him. This crowd, this movement, was teeming with stories akin to his own, individuals connected by the shared threads of struggle against an indifferent system. In harmony, speakers with different backgrounds took the stage, adding their voices to the growing chorus demanding reform. Each offered heartfelt testimony, echoing personal tales of prejudice, driving home the truth that Malcolm's story was but one in a tapestry woven with countless others. The mood shifted between solemn reflection and impassioned exhortation, shaping the dynamic flow of the gathering like a river, both ebbing and surging, guiding all within its path toward a common destination. Carol Washington climbed the makeshift podium, her presence a beacon of elder wisdom. "We are the lineage of those who refuse to stay silent," she called, her eyes gleaming fiercely, "and by our actions we etch their courage into history." Malcolm absorbed these moments with a complex swirl of emotions, cognizant that the weight of their demands was not solely on his shoulders. As each voice reverberated through the space, it built upon the foundation of collective yearning for a fair and equitable society. Around him, the square, at once so ordinary and grand, seemed to merge with the aspirations of everyone present. It wasn't just a backdrop, it was a front line in the battle for justice, a canvas on which they painted their dreams of change with indelible strokes of unity. Approaching the center, Daphne Reed, embodying both journalist and ally, captured the scene with precision. Her pen became an extension of the movement, ingraining their message into the annals of the ongoing societal narrative. The stories, personal yet universal, were reshaping the future chapter by chapter. As afternoon shadows lengthened, the protests swelled, buoying those in attendance with an unwavering sense of purpose. Lines of police observed from the periphery, a reminder of the ever-present tension between authority and the ideals manifesting before them. "Change is inevitable when the call is as loud as this," Malcolm murmured to Xavier, who stood steadfast beside him, eyes aglow with the fire of the moment. Xavier nodded, his voice resolute. "We'll make sure of that, Malcolm. Today isn't just a blip. It's a beacon." For Malcolm, the reality of standing here amidst such monumental support cemented an awakening. He was no longer just a man striving under the weight of a singular injustice. He was part of something larger, a catalyst fusing community and resolve into a potent force. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the square in hues of indigo and gold, the vibrancy of the crowd showed no sign of waning. Instead, it echoed with promise, a covenant that this protest marked a beginning, not an end, trusting in each other, Fueled by the resolve within and the solidarity surrounding them, the people gathered here would not falter in their fight. The journey was long, but its progress was now unstoppable, carried forth on the tide of united action. Inside the austere confines of the precinct, a different energy charged the air, a stark counterpoint to the fervent urgency outside. Officer Stephen Barrett sat across a steel table mirrored by his union representative, a chasm of silence between him and the world of activism clamoring at the gates. The harsh overhead lighting accentuated the lines of stress etched into his face, a depiction of the fraying edges around a man grappling with his professional mortality. His hands were clasped tightly, a subconscious attempt to restrain the tremor that had surfaced following the incident. To those around him, Barrett projected confidence, yet a corrosive uncertainty gnawed at the edges of his resolve, much like the termites that devoured the foundation of trust within the halls of justice. The union rep, Ted Lawson, an old warhorse with graying temples and unfazed by the din outside, leaned forward, breaking the silence with a voice honed from years in the trenches. "Look, Steve, we maintain control by sticking to the script. You acted within the reasonable framework of perception and threat." His words were carefully measured, a shield against the rising tide of blame that threatened to breach their defenses. Barrett's gaze flickered, staring at his own reflection in the observation glass, a specter that mirrored the public's angry scrutiny. "Perception and threat, right," he murmured, the words rolling hollow off his tongue. Inside, he questioned their moral arithmetic, a cacophony of what-ifs roiling beneath the surface of recalled training and raw experience. The door swung open as Captain Ray Donaldson, Barrett's superior, entered, his demeanor grave, each step the weight of an institution. The captain paused briefly, appraising the scene with shrewd eyes, his voice carrying the authority of a man conditioned by the vicissitudes of leadership. "We need to get ahead of this, Steve," he announced, breaking the veil of complacency that had hung over the proceedings. Barrett shifted uncomfortably. "Look, I did what I was trained to do. That situation was chaotic, and I reacted. Your reaction placed all of us under a microscope, and right now entire precincts are questioning our procedures." Captain Donaldson retorted, the reprimand gentle, yet seeping with the expectation of composed understanding. Pride clashed with conscience within Barrett. He felt the heat of scrutiny like a brand on flesh, the public's perception painting him as more perpetrator than protector. "It was real shit out there," he claimed defensively, his voice tinged with a desperate undercurrent he couldn't quite mask. "I acted on instinct." The union rep intervened, playing his role as mediator masterfully. "Steve's compliance with procedures needs to be the focus. We stand by our officers. We must uphold the integrity of the badge." "Integrity of the badge," Barrett echoed, a bitter taste in his mouth. The phrase resonated with irony against the echoes of protest that had become a constant refrain in his world. The cries of injustice outside, challenging the validity of that very integrity. "The law will look into this, Steve," Captain Donaldson finally said, softening. "What we need is transparency and cooperation. Show them you're willing to cross that bridge, not barricade it." Barrett considered the symbolic chasm Donaldson painted, a bridge between perception and reality. The realization of his own biases seeped into the crevices of his thoughts. Malcolm was a firefighter, a man doing the exact opposite of what Barrett had perceived. The irony left a bitter residue, one he couldn't shake no matter the reassurances built atop institutional defenses. The businesses were viewed as a boon. "We need you to make a statement," Donaldson continued, his tone a tempered plea rather than an order. "It's our chance to redirect some of this anger and show reformative willingness." Barrett hesitated, the heavy pause marking his struggle. Pride warred with the burgeoning knowledge that reform wasn't just about tools of the trade, but about the very mindset with which those tools were wielded. "I didn't want this," he admitted quietly, the confession braver than denial. "You'll be briefed and prepped so there's no misstep. Stick to the facts, no embellishments, no illusions. Let's show the world we are listening," Ted advised, tapping on the script again as though it were a lifeline. Barrett nodded, swallowing the knot of regret lodged in his throat. His previous encounters with scrutiny were nothing compared to this, a public tribunal where his fate and that of his kind was contested not in courtrooms, but across digital landscapes and city streets. As their discussion wrapped, Barrett was left with the hollow reassurance of procedure and the impending dread of judgment. He felt the external world begin to encroach, the voices from outside seeping in through the walls, whispering truths he could no longer ignore. Alone in the aftermath of the meeting, Barrett stood by the precinct window, witnessing the sprawling protest below. Each anonymous face represented a story akin to Malcolm's, a reflection of experiences he hadn't fathomed until they were thrust into his path. The lens through which he viewed his actions was changing, slowly unearthing the biases ingrained as silently as smoke permeates air. In that moment, Barrett glimpsed the divide that separated officer from civilian, protector from perceived threat, a divide made conspicuous by the very hand that had wielded it. Whether he could cross back over and willingly face what lay on the other side was a question etched into the shades of the gathering dusk. As the fire station doors rumbled open with mechanical precision, Malcolm stepped out into daylight, still trying to process the tumultuous days that had turned him from a private citizen into an emblem of unwanted fame. The gauntlet of his existence now lay between fire and narrative, a pattern unexpected and unsought, yet irresistible in its call for justice and reform. The sidewalk thrummed with the distant echoes of ongoing protests, a constant reminder of the battle waging beyond the periphery of normalcy. Malcolm's gaze tracked the familiar path from station to street, his work boots heavy with the memories he had once tread without a second thought. The world around him seemed caught in a tension of suspended breath, for here he stood, a firefighter dedicated to saving lives, grappling with the truths his uniform couldn't shield him from, the echoes of ingrained prejudice that burned fiercer than any blaze. Perception had split his reality like a fault line, yet it was not enough to erase his belief in duty. Today he was returning from mandatory leave, a sop to procedures and an illusion of healing sunk in bureaucratic verbiage. His walk felt like a march back into the fray. Scott, his longest-standing ally at the station, was there to greet him. Arms folded, worry lines creased deeper into his forehead than Malcolm remembered. "Good to have you back," Scott remarked, his voice tinged with cautious optimism. "Good to be back," Malcolm replied, forcing a smile. "Feels like I've been gone a lifetime, though." "Tell me about it," Scott huffed, gesturing expansively. "This place doesn't run quite the same without you around." They shared a moment of camaraderie forged through shared challenges, a nod to countless shifts where chaos reigned but never broke them. Yet, beneath the familiar comfort, Malcolm sensed the changes wrought by his recent crucible. "Malcolm!" came Terry's enthusiastic shout as the young rookie bounded over, breathless with admiration and concern. "You're practically a legend now, man. I can't imagine what these past few days have been like." Malcolm chuckled dryly, shrugging off the acclaim pinned upon him by circumstance. "Legendary involuntary leave, maybe. All this noise." He paused, searching for words that could encompass the sea change. "It's been intense, but I'm here, and I'm going to keep doing what I've always done." "Stay resilient, Malcolm," Terry said earnestly. "You've shown everyone what it means to stand tall." "Just doing my job," he replied. The simplicity of the statement grounded him in a way he hadn't anticipated. Hands clapped against his shoulder firmly, offers of coffee and quips about evening shifts flitting around. Their solidarity, an unspoken language articulated through gestures and steely resolve, whispered quiet promises of survival against odds stacked high. It was a chorus of unity that spoke louder than the vitriol outside, a bedrock upon which Malcolm had always depended. As they settled into the rhythm of work, the polishing of equipment, checking of hoses, the meticulous readiness that preludes battle, Malcolm felt a semblance of normalcy returned. Flares, flameless, but burning with renewed purpose. His phone vibrated, and as he checked the message, news of another protest filtered through. The community's unrelenting momentum pushed them onward, a wave Malcolm was buoyed by, standing as he did at the nexus between personal trial and collective cause. Scott joined him during a brief lull, offering a steaming mug that cut through the chill air. "It can't be easy, becoming the face of something bigger than any of us," he said, thoughtful eyes on the cityscape beyond. "It's strange," Malcolm admitted, holding the warmth in his hands. "I never imagined myself a part of this, but now there's this need to keep moving forward, to not just put out fires, but to change what we can, while we can." The words felt heavier than the helmet he'd donned daily, but they carried a promise stitched with iron, a decision made amidst chaos and resolved in the calm fervor of purpose, the shedding of naivete for acceptance, the embrace of what it meant to live a life defined by more than the moment. And now, here, standing shoulder to shoulder with his fellow firefighters, Malcolm was propelled by his inner compass, a spark kindled by silent determination that pushed against the layers of injustice with an unrelenting demand for change. His next shift beckoned, heralding both unknown challenges and the opportunity to reclaim what prejudice had sought to tarnish. But standing there, Malcolm knew that his resolve and the newfound support that surrounded him lent strength beyond measure. And as the call came, a dispatch, a plea for aid, the familiar urgency layered over the fear of past confrontation and uncertain oblivion. Malcolm readied himself for the roar of sirens and the rush toward danger, equally aware of journeying through its traumas and shadows. For here, upon the charred ground of adversity, lay the seeds of transformation, where heroes like him rose, human and untethered, ready to reclaim each day with undiminished fire. In the sanctuary of home, a place now tinged with shades of anxiety, Malcolm found himself confronting a dynamic unlike any he encountered in the field. The modest yet warm confines of the living room wrapped him like a well-loved quilt, comforting but no longer insular. Here, the walls seemed to pulse with conversations etched into family lore, decisions whispered and shouted, fueled by the night's tension. His wife Lena bustled in the kitchen, her movements brisk and precise as she prepared dinner. The soft clatter of kitchenware mingled with the scent of spices, providing a sense of peace, tenuously woven amidst the strains of upheaval. Lena, with her unwavering support and steel-trapped mind, had held the fort while everything outside felt tumultuously beyond control. Another reason to push against the realities that sought to bind them. His two children, teenagers yet already wise beyond their years, products of a world that demanded they grow up informed and aware. Malcolm knew their lives had shifted unexpectedly into focus because of him, and that knowledge was both a burden and profound motivator. "Dad, you're home!" Their voices cut through the room like rays of sunlight, as Alex and Kayla bounded from where they had been folding laundry. Their faces were alight with a mixture of relief and concern, a potent combination that had burned within Malcolm too often of late. "Hey, kiddos," Malcolm greeted, drawing them into a hug that conveyed what words could not. A father's silent vow to shield and guide them despite the unpredictable landings of reality. The challenges he faced were etched into the lessons he hoped they would learn wisely from the safety of home. "You're famous now," Alex quipped, his adolescent bravado thinly masking deeper concern. "Saw your face on like a billion news channels." Malcolm chuckled, ruffling his son's hair. "Not sure I'd call it fame, bud. Just doing what's right and hoping people listen for once." Kayla leaned against him, her voice smaller but no less determined. "It's scary out there, Dad, but what you're doing, it's important, isn't it?" Her words cut deeply, affirmation mingled with the staunch perseverance of youth. "Important and difficult," he acknowledged, meeting her gaze with steady resolve. "But we don't back down from what we know is right." Lena joined them in the living room, drying her hands with a kitchen towel, exuding a grounding presence that steadied Malcolm's resolve. "Dinner's ready soon," she announced, her eyes betraying a depth of understanding grown from an unspoken bond. They gathered around the modest table, the customary clinks and clatters accentuating the familiar rituals of family life. Yet beneath each word lay something unyielding, recognition of the world beyond their door, a world they were shaping through courage and endurance. While conversation navigated through everyday matters, Malcolm's attention drifted to Lena, caught by the glimpse of worry she tried to mask with every casual smile. They had been partners, confidants, and stalwarts for each other. Each challenge only reinforced their understanding and shared reservoir of quiet faith. Both words and silences were newly laden with implications of the roles they played, of the futures they hoped to secure beyond the frame of a singular moment or misguided assumption. Lena squeezed Malcolm's hand, a gesture full of shared memories and affirmations, a simple yet powerful glove of reassurance. As the evening unfurled, Kayla and Alex returned to their rooms, leaving Malcolm and Lena the only witnesses in the dimming glow of twilight. She fixed him with a tender gaze that enveloped the room with warmth, born of familiarity and love. "Proud of you," she murmured, and though the words were softly spoken, they resounded in his chest with astonishing Herculean weight. Malcolm nodded, drawing her closer, cradling the certainty they both harbored through the challenges yet unsolved. "None of this changes without us, without people like us challenging it." Lena rested her head against his shoulder, feeling his heartbeats resonate with hers, steady and unfaltering. "No turning back now, Malcolm. That was never an option," he replied softly, their words as much a pledge to the life they'd built together as it was to creating a world they wished for their children. As the house settled into the tranquility of night's embrace, Malcolm could still feel the pulse of purpose coursing through the very foundations of his home. The weariness of the days lay bedded amidst newfound convictions. The fear that had once threatened his serenity had been replaced with something fiercer, more enduring, a foundational strength rooted in truth shared between them, unbreakable in its resolve. Together they faced the road ahead, certain that their paths, like rivers, carried them beyond the horizons of their current adversity. Home was no longer just refuge, but battleground, equipped with the promise of change, nurtured by the evenness they summoned each day. Every dawn further illuminating the fierceness of what they fought for, a future aligned with justice and compassion. The town hall meeting was already brimming with tense energy when Malcolm arrived, the few remaining seats filling fast as the community gathered to confront the chasm that recent events had cleaved open. The room was a cacophony of whispers and rustling papers, a crowded testament to the diverse yet united front demanding their voices to be heard. It was a space where passions would meet policy, a crucible blending dissent with the ambition for transformative liberties. At the podium, City Councilor Janine Foster, a woman known for her unflinching advocacy, commanded attention with her calm demeanor, dressed in crisp professionalism that belied the fire in her eyes. Her open invitation to an exchange of ideas had brought together this eclectic mix of constituents, sworn to debate the path of justice and restore bonds of trust fractured by prejudice. Malcolm slipped into a seat near the front, reconciling his dual roles as both participant and emblem of the evening's urgency. Around him, council members, activists, citizens, and law enforcement sat intermingled, an indivisible reflection of the community at large. Their presence here tonight was a tacit acceptance that change required more than outrage. It demanded discourse. The officer at the center of the uproar, Stephen Barrett, was seated near the periphery, his posture rigid with discomfort and contemplation. Malcolm's own gaze lingered upon him briefly, recognizing the personal turmoil that must accompany such a fall from certainty. Whatever lay within Barrett's soul, Malcolm knew that tonight's engagement was meant to serve a greater purpose than recrimination alone. "Thank you for joining this essential dialogue," Counselor Foster began, her voice threading through the room and steadying the myriad distractions with practiced ease. "And thank you especially to Mr. Malcolm Ward, whose courage and actions have sparked this crucial conversation." The room was suffused with a charged silence, anticipation sharpening the edges of every word exchanged. Counselor Foster laid out the framework for what tonight might accomplish: reforms in police training, community oversight committees, initiatives aimed at dissolving the biases unconsciously ingrained within protective institutions. It wasn't long before Malcolm was called to speak. Stepping from anonymity into the heat of the spotlight, his heart hammered at the awareness of so many eyes on him, but nothing in the world now would halt the force of the truth he carried on behalf of many. Facing the crowd, his resolve crystallized, and Malcolm began to articulate the realities many gathered had lived, the societal shadow they now sought to dispel. "It's about saving lives," Malcolm intoned, his voice cutting through the previous murmur with its quiet authority. He met the eyes of those who would soon determine the contours of their shared future. "To me, this has never been just about bricks or badges. This touches on the principles we advocate when we commit to being part of something we expect the world to trust. If we don't strive to reflect love and protection for all community members equally, we fail our oaths, our duty." A quiet murmur of appreciation swelled in the audience, affirming the depth and authenticity of his words, building momentum on the honesty that resounded through the lifeworks of their assembly. From a corner of the room, activist and staunch ally Carol Washington stood with fervor and solidarity. "Remember, these are principles that should have always guided our care in the community," she asserted, her stance as firm as the ground they sought to reclaim. Discussion erupted in earnest after Malcolm's testimony, finding resonance in varying perspectives, an array covering ambition and caution alike. One proposal involved increased funding for community policing initiatives, bringing law enforcement closer to neighborhoods in genuine partnership. Another considered enforcing stricter penalties for officers found guilty of misconduct. In the midst of dialogue, Officer Barrett hesitantly raised his hand, an unwritten script waiting to be spoken. The whispered conversations quietened as Malcolm and those gathered turned towards the man who symbolized the challenge and opportunity this meeting embodied. He rose, taking the stance of a man balancing tightly upon judgment's precipice. "I owe an apology," Barrett began, voice tremulous yet deliberate. "Not just to you, Mr. Ward, but to everyone gathered here." His confession cut away the shadow's hold, illuminating vulnerability and possible growth. "This event has forced me to reevaluate my presence as a protector, and I now see with painful clarity the prejudices I unknowingly upheld, a place where reform has needed to reach sooner." This admission was a fragile bridge cast tentatively into the torrent, a reach toward healing and recognition. To those weary of such words, it spoke of the hope cautiously kindled, a mere spark for some, yet kindling for others. Counselor Foster seized the opportunity, masterfully directing the conversation toward actionable outcomes and consensus building, painting the path through dialogical mists with strokes of conviction. Policymakers, educators, and law enforcement contributed resolutions and ideas designed to shift the paradigm, placing emphasis on compassion, education, and comprehensive reform. As the meeting drew to a close, it had propelled the community toward a horizon they could aspire to grasp. While ephemeral tensions lingered, they were tempered by the acknowledgement of shared territory and bridging bonds. Malcolm felt a pulse of warmth as Barrett approached him, their handshake an exchange of paths, diverging yet growing nearer. "People like you make the hope for change tangible," Barrett said, the resolve in his eyes promising work yet unfinished, but began anew. As townsfolk whispered dissent and conviction beneath the stars, Malcolm understood that while there was no immediate absolution, there lay the audition of incremental triumph within gathering courage. Their moments encompassed real voices, truths spilling through unashamed, daring the dawn with harmonies built upon justice. In the cool serenity of the evening, as the town hall emptied of its populace, resonant convictions subsisting as sustenance, Malcolm walked onward, spirit carried by a song of togetherness, splees shared in a motion toward rebirth. The journey was theirs to envision, heartfelt among the confluent streams of renewal and resiliency washing the traces of discord away. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee combined with the acrid smell of newspapers enveloped the dimly lit basement of St. James Church, the unofficial command center for a burgeoning movement that had taken root within the heart of the community. It was here that Malcolm found himself surrounded by fellow advocates, strategists, and members of the community, all converging in a concerted effort to amplify the momentum of change that had begun in earnest. Around the long, narrow table, Carol Washington presided over the gathering with a confidence that was calming and electrifying, a beacon for those seeking direction. Her voice wove through the room like a reassuring thread, points outlined on a whiteboard that captured the flickering light of the hanging bulb. They had laid bare their intentions: police accountability, improved community resources, educational reform, a vision for a future that transcended reactive measures and aimed for foundational shifts. "We are here because we believe in the reality we can forge together," Carol declared. Her words lifted the room, a refrain repeated often, yet reborn today with newfound vitality. The collective energy was palpable, an orchestrated beat to which they all marched with determined optimism. Each person shared their progress since the council meeting, reflections on what strategies could evolve from learned experiences, and ideas for engaging those still numb to the call for solidarity. "We're gaining traction on social media thanks to Xavier's team," said Daphne Reed, who, despite her role as a journalist, had become an indelible ally. "There's a dynamic unfolding. Our story is reaching people, encouraging dialogue in spaces previously stagnant." Beside her, Malcolm sat quietly, absorbing the synergy, a challenger turned catalyst in this grassroots campaign. The interplay of advocacy stimulated reflections of his own transformation, the shift from a public emblem of victimhood to a proactive agent of change, grappling publicly with the personal cost of courage. "We're seeing participation grow," Xavier interjected, animated by recent successes. "Young people are hungry to know how they can help, and involving them in outreach programs is critical." Their discussion encompassed coordinated community projects, initiating neighborhood workshops where police officers could interact as mentors rather than enforcers. Youth groups could be inspired through shared cultural activities, healing the rifts cemented by fear through familiar association. "Education is a bedrock for the vision we envisage," Xavier asserted. "We need to integrate racial bias training comprehensive enough to enlighten those carrying the mantle of supposed authority." The ideas bubbled forth with enthusiasm and determination, their bubbling fervor rooted in the recognition of what could be achieved when those entrusted with the community's care embraced humility and learning. Throughout, Malcolm pondered how his ordinary life had entwined with extraordinary destiny. His own voice of lived experience had ignited sparks of awareness, fostered debates, and illuminated paths previously shrouded. The flame of motivation that joined them illuminated a singular, powerful truth. They were more than responders. They were builders and architects of a more equitable world. "We must continue involving families in these conversations," Lena suggested, her welcoming presence lending warmth to the otherwise earnest tone of the meeting. "Engaging them ensures the fight for equality and compassion remains rooted in our homes." Her words resonated deeply, fueling a solemn commitment within Malcolm and those gathered to fight for legacies paved in empathy, leaving hollow animosities and bruised histories behind. As discussions wove into plans, intentions crystallized in handwritten notes and meticulously drawn timelines, splayed across the table like navigational charts. Each voice and vision carefully stitched into this patchwork mission, each somber nod shot through with the golden thread of hope. "I know we have a long way to go," Carol acknowledged, voice clear as she reviewed the strategic blueprints, "but we gain momentum every day. There's movement toward the change we all seek." In this comfortable, subterranean crib of ideas and activism, they shared not just the burden of a journey commenced, but the profound capability of unified hearts and busy hands. Together they forged alliances to kindle shared goals, pledging to nurture resilience through necessity's field until these necessary changes grew with roots stout and unwavering. As they adjourned, camaraderie lingered, settling on the thrumming foundation of their shared mission. Gathering their notes and commitments, they parted ways. Yet, even as they rose from their shared table, still animated by the spark of collaboration, Malcolm felt himself metaphorically linked by terminus and tether to each of their ongoing efforts, embracing this newfound sense of collective kinship. As he emerged into the enlightening glow of day, now an echo of his earlier weight, the burden remained, but was made more bearable through the paradigm shift they had wrought. Stories, once waiting, like seeds scattered on hard ground, now gestated within the cradling soil of alliance and action. It was thrilling work lifted by unyielding aspirations, a profusion of thoughtful victories that, even as darkness loomed somewhere beyond, united them into a scaffold reminiscent of a world aspiring to blossom anew. Their task, as arduous and monumental as the steep roads behind them, now lent wings to collective dreams. Malcolm understood the responsibility of the moment he had been thrust into, the leadership shared and wielded by allies gathered. Weighed beneath the ardor of countless expectations, their mission stood unyielding strength, rewritten in union, a testament, a triumph of what community, indestructible, might achieve against staggering odds. The late afternoon sun melted into the horizon, casting long shadows through the tall windows of the precinct's internal affairs office. Officer Barrett sat there, a silent equation scribbled across his brow that only he could solve. The recent days had seen public opinion whip through the corridors of power like a purifying wind, and he found himself at the restless center, a fulcrum around which conversations of justice, race, and community pivoted. Opposite him sat Lieutenant Karen Driscoll, her presence formidable yet tempered with empathy. Her role was to scrutinize, to understand the intricacies that led good officers astray, or revealed the systemic undercurrents that were typically swept beneath the veneer of order. "Officer Barrett," Driscoll began, the timbre of her voice steady yet carrying the gravity of their discussion. "This investigation seeks to understand motivations and circumstances. Our goal isn't punitive, it's to learn, to improve." Barrett nodded, a slight clench of his hands the only indicator of tumult beneath his calm exterior. He knew this process would expose the sinews of his career, lay bare every decision, both grand and minor, and perhaps most agonizingly, put him face to face with his implicit biases. "Take me through the events of that night," Driscoll prompted, her pen poised to capture the essence of his narrative. He exhaled, words forming in the air with deliberate unease. "I saw Malcolm Ward at the scene. Didn't recognize him at first with all the chaos. He seemed like a suspect in the heat of the moment. Was there anything in his demeanor or actions that prompted threat perception?" Driscoll queried, drilling deeper beyond surface justifications. In the sterile quiet of the small room, Barrett felt the answer unfurl with profound discomfort. "No, looking back, Malcolm was acting as I'd expect any firefighter. It's clear now, it was my own perspective, my own assumptions." Driscoll's gaze remained steady, yet in her silence, Barrett understood an invitation to self-reflection. The haunting realization settled further. His decisions injected fear into a heroic figure under society's trust. "Do you understand what this represents about systemic issues?" Driscoll asked gently but directly, an interrogative meant to open doors of awareness rather than shut them. "Yes," he said, honesty born from painstaking revelation. "My reaction wasn't born in a moment. It's something deeper. I've got ingrained perspectives I need to confront, and that night forced me to reckon with that." Listening to himself, Barrett felt the bitter tang of guilt and the pit of stomach dread as he journeyed inward, each word both liberating and calcifying the commitment to morph into an ally rather than antagonist. "Tell me about your history leading up to this incident," Driscoll directed, transitioning the conversation toward a broader context. an examination beyond one act to explore a tapestry of influences. Describing his career through the lens of this enlightening perspective, Barrett found himself critically parsing a landscape previously unseen. Through retelling routine operations now tinged by the clarity of new light, he uprooted echoes of prejudice long untended and thus unchecked. Driscoll recorded it all with scrupulous care, pausing intermittently to probe correlations between personal evolutions and departmental culture. Her investigation cut into the marrow of the office's underpinnings, casting a lens not just on Barrett but on an institutional mirror reflecting its composite faces. It was crucial to understand this microcosm within the broader police ethos, a requirement before measures could be proposed to reconstruct the scaffolding upon which community trust was tentatively rebuilt. As the conversation ebbed, reflection cultivated through introspection, Barrett acknowledged the necessity of continuous learning alongside disciplinary actions. Transformation demanded acknowledgement, followed by restorative endeavor, and as arduous as acceptance felt, it represented a compass. Lieutenant Driscoll's gaze lingered thoughtfully as she closed her notebook. "Officer Barrett, this dialogue is the seed. Genuine reform will require our persistent ethics and humanity. But dialogue moves mountains. Just as it levels walls, the gravity of her words settled into his consciousness, an implicit roadmap for forging anew. As Barrett rose to leave, the daylight outside had waned into the evening, fittingly emblematizing the dusk of one erroneous certainty and the dawn of heart-born resolution. Emerging from the building, he breathed deeply, feeling the sense of binding webs unspooling, both humbled by the revelations this had elicited and burdened with the necessary steps for restitution. His pathway now stretched beyond personal reckoning towards societal redress, a duty no longer just his to shoulder, but one shared with counterparts determined to rise together toward an equal future. With eyes fixed on the skyline, Barrett felt the maelstrom of public outcry edging away, slowly replaced by the realization of allies forged through fires of common truths. Their voices rang out, a testament and cadence to which he was eternally attuned, a synchrony wherein his own footfalls joined and reconsidered, steps adjusting shadows by soul-earned illumination. As dusk settled over the city, Malcolm found himself sitting on the porch of his childhood home, the familiar shadows evoking memories that clung like ivy to the edges of his consciousness. It was here, on this worn wooden threshold, that the echoes of his past converged with the narrative of his life in the present, where the tender tendrils of memory entwined with the stark reality of his ongoing struggle for justice. The quiet of the evening provided a canvas for reflection, as scenes from his youth played across his mind's eye. Growing up black in America had been a journey navigated through implicit warnings and explicit prejudices, lessons as relentless as the changing seasons. His parents had instilled in him an intrinsic awareness of identity, while also ensuring he was prepared to confront a world fraught with complexity. He recalled sitting here with his father, a man of quiet dignity, who had imparted wisdom through stories rather than lectures. Malcolm could almost hear his father's voice now, a silky baritone that resonates with commands for caution and fortitude. "Son, remember there will be times when just being who you are will feel like a battle, but never forget your worth." His father's words had enveloped him like armor, layering resilience over vulnerability, creating a shield Malcolm carried into every bravely faced day. Yet despite a lifetime spent learning how to navigate the tides of bias, he had never imagined his actions would ignite such widespread implications. A soft scraping broke into his reverie as the screen door creaked open. Lena emerged, her steps quiet, yet her presence anchoring him to the moment. She joined him on the porch, the unspoken connection between them as palpable as the cooling evening air. "Lost in thought?" she asked, her voice gentle yet probing in that knowing way of hers. "Bit," he admitted, the confession more liberating than he expected. "Just thinking about the past, trying to understand how it brought us to this moment." She edged closer, her arm looping through his as they watched the colors of twilight blur into night. "We're all shaped by what came before," Lena responded, her gaze scanning the sky as if tracing constellations of forgotten histories. "It's a tapestry, and right now, Malcolm, you're helping weave in something new." The sentiment comforted him, a reminder of the resistance and hope that had merged into his marrow. He considered the moments of prejudice that had shaped him, the unanswered questions of youth, wordless slights at family dinners, accusations that clung like smoke long after an encounter had ended. Now these threads were rewritten in myriad voices rising for change, each thread strengthening their cause. He could see Alex and Kayla through the window, their silhouettes outlined against the warm glow inside. Proof that the battles his father fought, the foundation they laid as parents and protectors, were being redefined in this era. Even amidst adversity, an opportunity emerged to repurpose those narratives for their children, building something that stood firm against the shifting winds of bias. "I can still feel him sometimes, you know," Malcolm said quietly, the admission a shared secret, spoken from the heart rather than intellect. "Of course," Lena reassured, tightening her grip. "Your father's watching and proud, no doubt, as proud as I am of you. You're taking what he taught you and amplifying it for others." Her affirmation radiated comfort that soothed his soul, cementing in him the drive to carry forward the lessons of the past. They sat there in the stillness, time weaving its narrative around them, a mosaic of memories interlacing with anticipations of progress. In the flickering lamplight, Malcolm sensed the presence of his ancestors, their stories whispered among the leaves rustling in the gentle breeze. He felt them urging him onward, part of the lineage that spoke resilience into his bones, compassing him through adversities, steadying him as he faced an uncertain future. "I guess you're right," Malcolm said, a soft chuckle escaping his lips. "This is bigger than I ever thought it would be." Lena leaned her head against his shoulder, the proximity fueling his resolve. "We all rise and fall together, Malcolm, and this, what we're striving for, it's worth rising for." Silence enveloped them once more, profound and heavy with context. From the depths of reflection, Malcolm emerged renewed, infused with a clarity born of understanding, a remembrance that the past was not just history remembered, but also a foundation laid dutifully for their collective steps forward. And as the first star blinked into existence above, he honored the path laid before him. The journey had crafted him in ways he had not anticipated, each chapter culminating in the here and now, a powerful testament to what had come before. Together they watched the world deepen into night, until it felt like it was just them in the universe, partners, elders, and lost voices, all witnessing the unfolding story of promise, a story ending only when bias itself was extinguished, leaving behind emboldened threads in an enduring tapestry of justice. The tamarind trees swayed softly in the mid-morning breeze, their leaves rustling like old men sharing secrets. The city park, normally a sanctuary of tranquility, was now bustling with energy, a battleground of ideology where trust and suspicion faced off in the open arena. In this communal space, Malcolm found himself amidst an assembly fraught with tension, yet charged by a unifying purpose that transcended individual preferences. Familiar faces dotted the grandeur of nature, coalition members mingling among the police officers and city officials who had gathered in a series of makeshift circles. The agenda for today was both stark and critical, a mediation session designed to bridge a gaping chasm that had been prominent within their community for far too long. At the center of it all, Counselor Janine Foster stood as the conduit through which dialogue flowed, an anchor amidst the sea of gathered souls. Her assured presence set the tone for the gathering, conveying the anticipation that together they might forge an understanding where discord had reigned. "Welcome, everyone," she began, her voice the timbre of authoritative grace. "Today's purpose is not only to listen, but to engage, truly engage, with those different from ourselves. It's about finding solutions beyond hostility, paving ways through the stories of our lived experience." Her words descended like gentle rain, resonant among those invested in unearthing the shared language of peace and positive transformation. The gathering aimed for a dialogue prism that refracted hope across multiple perspectives, each face nodding in quiet assent toward common purpose. Malcolm found his place in one of the smaller circles, a forum to which Officer Barrett had been assigned. The last time they had shared such proximity was under graver circumstances, where fear overshadowed their true callings. Now, in this open-air confessional, vulnerability seemed to be the currency exchanged for growth. Their circle was diverse, an intentional choreography of backgrounds, each participant encouraged to share fears, hopes, and reflections on the night's events and everything since. The stories unfurled, some compassionate, others poignant, a spectrum illuminating not only difference, but shared humanity. Seated directly across from Malcolm, Barrett broke the silence. "I know my presence here represents more than just me," he began, his gaze earnest, humbled. "I've looked back, and it's clear to me how easy it is to fall into patterns you don't even perceive, thinking you're just doing your part." Malcolm listened intently, his own story interwoven with Barrett's confession, tensions giving way to comprehension. The man across from him seemed a world away from the officer he had faced on that fateful night, awareness inching its way into the marrow of his understanding. "You start to realize," Barrett continued, "that it's voices like ours, like yours and mine, that can actually make a difference if we choose to reconcile rather than react." Malcolm leaned in. "That's why we're here, right?" he replied gently, "to speak those quieter truths aloud, where they can color the larger picture." Members of the circle nodded, their exchanges a woven fabric that stretched across backgrounds, occupations, and lived experiences. As each voice resonated within that intimate space, stories transformed, hinges on which opened doors once closed shut with rusted locks. Expectations gave way to realizations as each person contributed to the narrative, birthing a dialogue that was more than words. It was communion, a mutual act of building that softened the edges of misunderstanding. The mediation expanded outward in concentric circles of discourse, facilitated by Janine and dedicated volunteers who guided discussions, gently, yet with an imperative that resonated. Listen to learn, learn to change. In the gentle embrace of shared truths and revelations, new pathways opened. The distances between misconceptions collapsed into the promise of progress. Here, amidst the earthy scent of the landscape and the human exchange weaving through the air, Malcolm observed a microcosm of transformation from antagonism to alignment. The session concluded with hands joined in solidarity, a vivid reflection of the movement anchoring itself in reasons more profound than disagreement. Enemies became advocates, strangers fostered newfound kinship from the richness of their diverse identities. As Malcolm walked away from the gathering, accompanied by shared farewells and hopeful exchanges, the recognition of profound possibility thrummed within. He felt strengthened by their combined vow, a distilled awareness that this newfound understanding was its own journey, one that didn't end here but was nurtured by persistent, compassionate fidelity. A call interrupted the momentary peace. A summons from Xavier heralding news of a city council meeting, scheduled to formalize reform proposals into practice. It was the next step in their united quest, proof of their unyielding intent. Malcolm turned to go, meeting Barrett's eyes in farewell, their bond now sealed by mutual commitment rather than circumstance. This was the work of their hands, the song of promise and progress, each note lit by dedication to dismantling prejudices, bit by bit, growing a forest where the seeds had long been sown. Together, they ventured forth, footsteps echoing with the specific strength found in the reconciliation of differences and the fusion of stories, a journey shared and echoed across possibilities newfound, the cadence of their unstoppable march toward the dawn of just relationship. The cold air inside the courthouse seemed to bite deeper than the temperatures outside, a chill that had little to do with weather and everything to do with the stakes awaiting resolution. Malcolm stepped through the stately threshold, feeling both the gravity and anticipation swirling around the legal proceedings that were about to unfold. The corridors were a blur of people in motion, a bustling scene that resembled an anthill on the verge of discovery. As Malcolm queued through security, Alex and Kayla flanking either side, the sense of history-making tautened with each step deeper into the swirling mechanics of justice. Lena leaned close, her reassurance a balm against the unknown. "We're with you, all the way." Inside, the courtroom offered a stage upon which decisions that might shape futures were set to play out. High ceilings and wooden pews imparted weight and permanence to the gatherings, which now housed the hopes of those like Malcolm, poised for change, against the umbra of systemic inertia. They took their seats toward the front with a mixed crowd of journalists, activists, members of the public, and other key players readying to witness what was more than a mere hearing. This was a formidable confrontation with policy forged into practice, legacies of legal premises about to be subject to scrutiny and rectification. At the helm, presiding Judge Eleanor Campbell entered with a solemn carriage, her demeanor encapsulating the duty of judicious stewardship of not just laws, but of the ideals they ought to represent. Her arrival punctuated the symphony of sounds in the room, establishing order and anticipation as the proceedings began. "The matter this court deliberates today transcends immediate circumstances of a single case," Campbell noted, her voice a blend of measured authority and discernment. "We examine the broader implications on policy and procedures of how biases are interwoven into the fabric intended to shield our institutions and serve our community." As arguments were eloquently laid out by lawyers representing both sides, Malcolm found himself listening intently, his internal compass aligning with the truth revealed. Here was the essence of justice being deconstructed and examined, reframed for examination where progress intertwined with the accountability of its generators. Cynthia Nolan, representing Malcolm and his newfound allies, stood ready with the laser focus of an advocate honed by decades in the trenches of equality. Her opening rested on indelible truths. How training, bias, and consequence intertwined not only to cultivate harm, but desecrate trust. "Justice demands more than accountability for the past," Cynthia asserted, her voice firm yet laden with hope. "It calls for transformation, rooted in policy and practice, reflected and restructured into a system where equality is genuinely safeguarded." The courtroom absorbed her declarations, the walls seeming to amplify her call, and though silence met her statement, one sensed an awakening, born quietly seed-like in each listener. The defense presented their position, emphasizing the limitations of current structures, but more vitally, acknowledging their allegiance toward evolving beyond them. Herein lay a testament to what many sought, a redoubt of shared commitment, enabling protection throughout communities universally rather than selectively. As presentations wound on, stillness reigned across the chamber. This was not a quarrel cast into acrimony, but a tapestry of admissions allowing opportunities for unraveling long-dismissed assumptions. Within that serene pause, the foreboding quiet before the legal realm unwrapped its woven complexities, Malcolm witnessed justice in motion, the gears slowly turning towards a greater concord. Without fanfare, plans for structural overhaul crystallized in place, recommendations requiring de-escalation training, community outreach, enhanced bias detection, and accountability frameworks echoed through judicial discourse. Provided was a diagram not crumbling fault lines but laying foundations more equitable and trustworthy, an illustration marking transition from reactive to anticipative. It was here, on these pages of human endeavor and reflection, that they stood upon the threshold of a system reforged, not purely for reparation, but as blueprint for evolution. Outside, waves of supporters had gathered, placards lifted high in shared unity as news of the courtroom proceedings trickled through, moment upon moment brimming with the strength of watching revolutionary seeds take root. Malcolm silently shook hands with fellow advocates as they filed out, a shared recognition woven into each line and crease of weathered resolve. His heart felt immense gratitude, balanced with unshakable determination, an acknowledgement for those who stood alongside him, their journey now shared in common purpose for the work yet ahead. Lena's touch on his arm centered him, fixing into place their presence as co-navigators through the delicate dance of redefining justice. Together, they absorbed the energy carrying them forward, the potential brewing within courtroom walls, now a catalyst for change beyond the pamphlets and policies. And as they joined others in the square, amongst cheers and chiming voices, for that brief, timeless moment, Malcolm recognized how real justice was invariably collective, an assembly of hearts and voices, minds inspired and daring in peaceful unity against the chains of complacency. While the decisions made here unfurled ripples across community and nation, he recognized the essence of what anchored them amidst adversity, the harmonized chorus of diverse dreams blooming into illuminating reality, bound inextricably by the melodies of progress and promise. As the evening settled over the city, Malcolm found himself in a small, dimly lit bar tucked away on a quiet street. The place was a local haunt, a refuge where the cares of the world could be momentarily forgotten in the company of familiar faces and the low hum of jazz playing softly in the background. He nursed a drink, watching as the amber liquid caught the flickering candlelight, its warmth a counter to the chill of reality. The bar was an eclectic mix of patrons, locals unwinding from their day, heads bent in conversation, laughter cutting through the smoky air. Yet even here, amidst this atmosphere of relative calm, the events of the day lingered at the edge of Malcolm's thoughts like a half-remembered melody. The courtroom, with its tense deliberations and final judgments, had left a mark, etched deep in his consciousness, a reminder of the relentless pursuit of justice that had become his life. Just as he began to lose himself in the rhythmic pulse of the bass notes, the bell above the door chimed and Officer Stephen Barrett walked in. His presence was an unexpected aberration in the evening's easy flow. The uniform he wore a stark contrast to the muted pallor of the room. Malcolm tensed slightly at the sight, a habit formed by months of heightened defenses, but eased himself back into the comfort of his friend's support. Barrett hesitated at the entrance, eyes adjusting to the twilight within. Spotting Malcolm at the bar, he made his way over with a purposeful stride, imbued with echoes of unspoken intention. The ambient sounds of the bar seemed to recede as he approached, the space narrowing to just the two of them in a room full of witnesses or allies, depending on perspective. "Mind if I join you?" Barrett asked, his voice low but clear, laced with an undercurrent of vulnerability masked by the practiced control of a lifelong officer. Malcolm gestured to the empty stool beside him, curiosity piqued by the officer's unexpected overture. "Sure, take a seat." Barrett sat down, a man bearing more weight than was visible to the casual eye, a structural stress that manifested in weary shoulders and the lines of silent contemplation traced upon his brow. They sat in reflective silence initially, the gulf of shared experiences narrowing slightly with each passing moment. "I wanted to talk," Barrett began, his words grating against the quiet like gravel underfoot, "about what comes after everything that's happened." Malcolm glanced at him, interest piqued more from the tone than the content. "Go on," he encouraged, sipping his drink slowly. "There's a lot I've had to reckon with lately," Barrett continued, his admission resigned yet earnest. "Seeing the systems I once defended from a new perspective, realizing my part in the machinery, it's been a learning experience, to say the least." His confession hung in the air, neither boast nor apologetic, but a raw acknowledgement of fault and intention. Malcolm nodded, acknowledging the complexity woven into each of Barrett's revelations. "You know, there's a lot of talk about systemic change," Barrett added, "but it starts with personal change. You taught me that, even if it was the hard way." Malcolm recognized sincerity when he heard it, even amidst past grievances. His own path had been defined by an inherent understanding that real change demanded introspection, a breaking down before building back up stronger. He appreciated the officer's willingness to venture into such vulnerability, though it did not absolve past actions. "I'm working to be better," Barrett stated, voice tinged with conviction. "I'm looking into education programs that focus on bias, volunteering to help where needed." His words put forth a genuine determination, a desire to contribute positively, though metered by the shadows of what had been. "It's the right step forward," Malcolm acknowledged, sincerity in his voice. "We all need to become more aware, myself included." Their conversation extended, revealing layers of hope interspersed with moments where words were light gauze over wounds difficult to heal. Despite the undercurrent of unresolved history, the moment wasn't one of antagonism but collaboration, a mutual admission of shared involvement in shaping their community's trajectory. As the weight of the day wove into night, discussions turned to future aspirations grounded in renewed understanding, a mutual willingness to push beyond surface solutions into true, transformative action felt from within. "I want my kids to grow up in a world where they don't have to face what we have," Barrett admitted quietly, gaze fixed on the world beyond the glass, lit by the dim glow of street lamps and promise. "And that world starts with us, right here." "Absolutely," Malcolm agreed, solidarity forged in the fires of narrative and need. They raised their glasses to a tentative partnership that reflected paths diverging, yet harmonizing, toward a collective goal. Back in the company of his family later that night, as their home settled into stillness, Malcolm found clarity in the day's events. His life was a testament to the power of voices unified, even when born from discord, a truth he carried into darkness, stories crafting a legacy of intention, burning bright against injustices, illuminating paths anew toward enduring equity. For even as the world outside remained distorted by division, within Malcolm's heart lived the conviction of a potential, unchanged, and powered by the people, by those daring to fight, not just by word, but deeds intertwined, as justice championed by all. The early morning sun spilled through the windows of the community center, caressing the room with its golden light and casting long shadows on the polished wooden floor. Here in this modest space, adorned with colorful youth art and community achievement plaques, Malcolm Ward found the source of newfound purpose and resilience. These walls had seen countless gatherings, each one building the intricate layers of their unified struggle for justice. He stood amid a scattered array of chairs, feeling the anticipatory hum in the building like an orchestra tuning before a performance. Today was another step, a workshop meant to foster understanding and thaw the icy barriers that had once seemed insurmountable. The objective? A mutual dialogue among firefighters, law enforcement, and community members, all united by the belief that true change began not just with shifts in policy, but shifts in hearts and minds. His phone buzzed in his pocket, a reminder of the session's commencement time. Taking a breath, Malcolm surveyed the room. The faces that would soon fill this space represented a tapestry of lives interwoven by proximity and necessity, each thread distinct yet enhancing the whole. As people began filtering in, the noise grew, a chorus of greetings and subdued conversations floating on the air. Familiar faces bore histories of struggle, learning, and collaboration. New ones carried questions and perhaps skepticism, but all shared the quiet determination to listen, learn, and grow. Among the early arrivals was Carol Washington, her presence as commanding as ever, her calm demeanor a ballast amidst the sea of change. She approached Malcolm with a knowing smile, the lines of countless battles etched into her face, marking her as a seasoned warrior in their shared fight. "Another day, another chance," she murmured, her voice like a trusted mantra, highlighting possibilities to come. "Exactly," Malcolm replied, meeting her gaze with gratitude. "It's amazing seeing everyone come together like this. It's not about us versus them anymore. It's about we. Carol nodded, satisfied that the founding principles they once only dared to dream about now bore fruit, leading them beyond the crest of spoken intention into purposeful action. As the remaining participants took their places, the session commenced with introductions, each voice adding a layer of richness to the dialogue, the glue binding disparate experiences into an exchange made more potent by its diversity. One of the youngest attendees, a rookie cop named Maria, with a resolute gleam in her eyes, as eager as it was discerning, spoke out with a refreshing clarity. "I became an officer because I believe in protecting my community," she shared. "But I also believe protecting means understanding. I want to learn." Her words filled the room, drawing nods and quiet approval. They encapsulated precisely why they all were here, to bridge through empathy and education rather than intimidation and incognizance. Conversations ebbed and flowed, a harmonious blend of perspectives, each offering insights gleaned from personal narratives, merged into the wider discourse on justice, prejudice, and reform. This complex dance swirled around common goals, the participants gradually unthreading misunderstandings one conversation at a time. Amidst meaningful discussions, Malcolm facilitated exercises that encouraged partners chosen at random to share personal stories about moments in life they felt misunderstood. The exercise cultivated a genuine connection, empathy proving an enlightening salve, dressing invisible wounds made by preconceived notions and misguided instincts. Officer Barrett was there too, no longer as Malcolm's antagonist, but as a participant discovering his path in a shifting narrative. As he listened and learned alongside others, the axis of his thoughts pivoted beyond past constraints toward a horizon seen through unclouded lenses. "We don't always have the answers," Barrett admitted later during a break, glancing around at the engaged circles of interaction. "But being here, it teaches me what questions to ask." It was a simple truth, yet profound. A shared realization that knowing the right questions often opened pathways the answers alone could not uncover. As the session neared conclusion, the room echoed a collective promise. The palpable energy of shared commitment and rekindled trust unfurled in real time. The legacy they built today was a tapestry woven with threads of understanding, a future mirrored in learning born from diverse mosaics, united through passion as much as purpose. Malcolm stood in reflection, fueled by the resilience and unity displayed within those walls. Here, the embers of unity flared into life, altering flames, sparking the engines of progress that fired the generous hearts assembled. Within these moments, the fragility of beginnings intersected with the fortitude of lasting change. It was an embodiment of dreams finally within their grasp, aspiring to carve new trajectories across trenches of inequality, worn threadbare by struggle. As people filtered out into the sunlight, handshakes turning to hugs, the sense of a profound bond lingered. Bridges rebuilt, stronger than steel, rooted in the fertile landscape of potential discovery. Today was not the end, it was a beginning, a first step in the long march toward an egalitarian society, and Malcolm felt the amplified resolve among his comrades, aware that though their paths were uncertain, their destination shone luminescent at the edge of their personal horizons, guiding them inexorably towards justice, hard-earned and richly shared. The clouds that once cast an ominous shadow over the city's skyline had parted, revealing the sprawling metropolis bathed in the warm embrace of an autumn afternoon. As Malcolm maneuvered through the bustling streets, he felt the rhythmic pulse of the city echoing the beat of newfound hope, the sounds of a community in the midst of a tectonic shift, yearning for balance on the precipice of promise and reality. He was headed to the heart of the city's government district, where a summit was being held that afternoon to tackle systemic issues affecting public service roles. Today, Malcolm would lend his voice alongside others aiming to articulate the pain and struggles faced by many, an escalation intended to lift their stories from personal to universally political, from isolated lament to collective resolve. The council chamber was grand yet austere, its imposing architecture designed to evoke a sense of solemnity and purpose. As Malcolm entered, he felt the weight of his task settle comfortably on his shoulders. The room buzzed with soft voices, representatives from across the spectrum of civic service and citizen advocacy converging, driven by the need to push dialogue into action. Finding his designated seat beside Carol Washington and Xavier Thomas, Malcolm acknowledged the presence of allies familiar and new. For so many, these proceedings represented not just a crossroads, but a significant step toward systemic healing, a determined, if not wearied effort to address the layers of inequity woven through the very structures pledged to protect. As proceedings began, Committee Chair Rachel Adams took the podium, her poised demeanor and fervent earnestness capturing the room's attention. Today, we gather not only to address the injustices faced by those in public service roles, she intoned, her voice amplified with gravity, but to dismantle the conditions allowing biases to flourish unchecked. Her call to action rippled through the audience, resonating deeply with Malcolm and all present, for whom the quest for justice had been personal, profound, and, at times, seemingly insurmountable. One by one, speakers took the floor, each presentation a tapestry of experiences, frustrations, and strategies harnessed to redefine the narrative within public service. They shared instances of prejudice and bias, not barriers but challenges to overcome through reformation and honest introspection. Malcolm listened intently, the testimonies weaving a symphony of narratives into which his own wove seamlessly. Here was the intersection of voice and change, a chorus rising with intentionality to carve new paths where current circuits had failed them. Finally, Malcolm rose to speak, facing the assembly with an internal conviction nurtured through prior hardships, now transmuted to invincible strength. He began with his story, the firefighter whose heroics and dedication risked being overshadowed by unwanted confrontation. Yet in recounting, he used this narrative as a vessel to journey beyond the self, transporting listeners into hearts and minds reset to rise. We must strive to protect not only our homes from fire, but our communities from the flames of prejudice that smolder below the surface, he declared, each word meticulously paced. True progress means recognizing that service without empathy is futile. It must encompass knowing, growing, and tearing down the silencers within our institutions. He illustrated through dialogue the need for constant awareness, integration of diverse experiences into the soul of policymaking, evolution not just in strategizing but in execution, wherein acknowledgement came hand in hand with transformation. Malcolm's testimony resonated throughout the chamber, melding with the aspirations of each person in attendance. He saw, in the faces before him, the mirror of his friends, family, and colleagues, a compendium of hopes unified by the shared promise of collaborative dedication. Rachel Adams resumed the podium as Malcolm returned to his seat, her gaze sweeping with encouragement. The statements shared today will not remain dormant words. They form the basis of a living commitment that holds us accountable to both our values and our future. Applause swept through the room, a testament reverberating against the high ceilings as notions of togetherness echoed, creating a secure canopy of conviction. As Malcolm walked into the daylight, thoughts of those who shared in the collective endeavor buoyed his spirits. Around him, the city spoke in whispers of change, each footstep's echo a chord in the symphony of renewal. He knew their tasks were illuminating truths formerly obscured. This realization emerged as the substance where personal resolve bonded with societal momentum. They were entwined now, as warriors of integrity girded with the armor of knowledge, to fight not alone, but as sentinels enchanted with resilience and tempered by purposeful passion. Malcolm saw his strength mirrored in those allies who stood with him on the threshold of longer arc, an arc bending not solely toward justice, but through it, fully encompassing realms of equity woven by promise. In the golden light, sepia-touched, Malcolm sensed the deepest truths rising gently, laced intricately with the threads of shared intention. An epiphany, arising from coalesced dreams, to signify the beginning of unparalleled progress hitherto unseen. In the weeks following the summit, the city found itself embroiled in a dance of reckoning and restructuring, where the failures of the past were laid raw and new paths towards equity were being arduously carved. The police precinct, once a fortress of tradition and secrecy, had opened its doors to scrutiny, allowing the light of transparency to filter through its corridors. It was a slow, deliberate metamorphosis, requiring patience and vigilance, involving not only policy changes, but a fundamental shift in its cultural marrow. Malcolm, along with several passionate advocates and community leaders, was invited to sit in on a police department meeting, the first of its kind to welcome civilian oversight and direct input on systemic reforms. They gathered in a neutral space, the room a neutral palette, scrubbed of insignia and rank that had once divided protector and citizen. Seated at the head, Chief Andrew Hogan, a veteran officer but new to his role as leader, reflected the weighty responsibility of this confluence. His presence was formidable yet approachable, a man bearing the mandate of transforming intent into action. "We've summoned this task force," Hogan addressed, his gaze reaching each participant individually, "not as a symbolic gesture, but as the initial step towards integrating our community's voices into our practices. We must dismantle suspicions and erect bridges of constructive dialogue." The task force was diverse, representing the multiplicity of the city's populace. Community members sat alongside officers, each with a stake in the unfolding transformation, each committed to reform, yet from distinct perspectives and lived realities. As discussions unfolded, Malcolm listened and participated, ensuring the focus remained not solely on punitive measures, but on nurturing an environment, fostering accountability and growth. He paid keen attention to the litany of reports and personal experiences shared, recognizing the symphony of sincerity, harmonizing endeavors to illuminate the precinct's darkest facets. Officer Barrett, who had resolutely pledged to be part of this change, was seated across the table. His engagement in discussions offered fresh insights born from reflection, willingly immersed in learning devoid of rank or distinction. When it was Malcolm's turn to speak, he did so from a place of lived experience, his words a bridge between the plight of past discord and the potential of future cooperation. "It's crucial we implement ongoing immersive bias training across all levels," he asserted. "Real change demands understanding, integrating community wisdom into every fiber of the department." His proposal resonated, receiving nods of agreement and thoughtful consideration. Chief Hogan penned notes, the beginnings of structural amendments, gestating from those conversations. Each suggestion a first ripple in the wave sweeping through the precinct. "We also need to focus on de-escalation tactics," Maria, the rookie cop, interjected, her proactive spirit undiminished. "It's not just about instincts, but refining instincts that serve to unite rather than divide." Chief Hogan nodded, recognizing her commitment as emblematic of the fresh ethos they sought. "Every one of you here represents a commitment to the deeper integration of service as part of mutual respect and understanding," he responded. "We must evolve beyond protocols into empathetic guardianship." The sentiment was firmly grounded, a seed planted in collective soil, its tendrils exploring the textures of unified progress, where once they had found barren acceptance. Throughout the meeting, strategies converged toward a shared trajectory. Proposals for mentorship programs, community dialogues, civilian police liaison committees, all woven into a framework of trust and reciprocity. They envisioned a thriving ecosystem where conversations birthed cooperation and collaboration, building a resilient sequoia of faith that flourished under the guardian canopy of equitable practices. As the meeting concluded, resolutions were not merely aspirational, they were codified into actionable commitments, timetables, and outlined reforms waiting not just on the ink of approval, but the collective agreement to uphold their shared values. Outside the precinct, sunlight filtered through the crisp autumn foliage, creating a mosaic of warmth that cushioned the somber architecture. Standing together under the sprawling canopy, participants lingered, exchanging thoughts that extended far beyond bureaucratic walls. Moments that captured not outlines of dreams, but contours of reality, pursued with dauntless hearts. The precinct's doors, once symbolic of lines drawn and sides delineated, now opened to bid farewell not to divisions cast aside, but to visions fortified. With promises of future meetings echoing, Malcolm found himself standing alongside an evolving network of allies fortified by resilience and earnest conviction. They gravitated naturally toward shared dreams contributed by disparate experiences now fused in unity, traversing not alone, but anchored by the hope coalesced from purpose. He considered the pathway they journeyed upon, a path not without challenges or setbacks, but imbued with undeniable promise. This was progress not rehearsed in thought alone, but charismatically enacted and set to motion by the courageous heart of community becoming. Their movement inexorably flowed and flourished, as both reminder and testament, a life rooted in dignity, nourished by ideals unseen and daringly lived. As the vibrant cityscape stretched before him, Malcolm envisioned the road ahead branching into impactful solutions and quotidian exchanges tangled in incredulity, yet humbly majestic. One monumental step within transforming edifices would ignite embers within countless silently soaring pillars of hope, justice, equity, a future caressed by creation and potential unfolding, empowered through tireless engagement, transcending the conventional with lively grace. The cool breeze of early morning fluttered the curtains of Malcolm's living room as he prepared for the day's pivotal meeting. The city council's decision to bring forward reform proposals was the culmination of months of relentless advocacy, dialogue, and community engagement. Today, council members, community leaders, and citizens alike would come together to chart a course toward meaningful change within their local governance and law enforcement structures. Malcolm glanced at his reflection in the hallway mirror, a figure transformed by the events of the past months. The man staring back was no longer only a firefighter defined by his duty in flames. He was an advocate for justice, a rallying cry for those demanding a systematic overhaul of prejudice and bias entrenched within the system. His phone vibrated with a message from Xavier Thomas, a steadfast ally and youth leader whose influence within the younger demographic was both visionary and crucial. "Ready to make history today," the message playfully read, yet underpinned with an earnest willingness to kindle change. Malcolm smiled, pocketed his phone, and took a breath of resolve. He stepped out into a day that already thrummed with promise, walking toward the city council chambers where decisions echoing beyond walls awaited them. The approach to City Hall was flanked by banners and placards, testaments from protests past and pledges to movements continuing, each one scrawled with hope and urgency. Protesters and supporters mingled, their presence a vital tapestry of civic engagement, woven with an unyielding call for transformation. Inside, the council chamber mirrored a busy beehive, buzzing with an anticipation that was both exhilarating and sobering. As Malcolm took in the scene, his eyes met familiar faces, bound by the same sense of mission. Carol Washington, Daphne Reed, Officer Barrett, and Maria, all pillars holding aloft the promise of reform. The meeting commenced with Councilor Janine Foster's commanding gavel, its resonance echoing authority and integrity across the assembly. "Today we transform dialogue into action," she declared, setting the tone with assured determination. "Our goal is to sow seeds of reform that cultivate the trust between those sworn to serve and those they protect." Every detail of the proposals was meticulously unpacked. Policy overhauls, integrative community programs, comprehensive sensitivity training, and mechanisms for accountability. The framework transformed the room into a crucible of innovation as voices and ideas collided in collaborative symphony. The extent of their collective endeavor was made vividly apparent not only through eloquent speeches but robust discussions that spoke of shared experiences and innovative solutions. They bore witness to the conviction growing like a steady flame, illuminating corners where previously only shadows brooded. When Malcolm spoke, he did so with a grounded clarity that grew from his journey, a bridge of understanding extending beyond merely procedural boundaries. We don't just need new policies, he emphasized, eyes sweeping over fellow council members. We need a culture shift in how we perceive and interact with each other, aligning our actions, beliefs, and policies with the equity we preach. His words found purchase, expanding discussions into realms often bypassed. Empathy, fictively tangible amidst the rhetoric redefined by context and caring. Officer Barrett, once the face of division now manifested as proponent for change, voiced his support, adding nuance and reflective agency from freshly awakened paths. These reforms aim at harnessing our purpose together, Barrett agreed, to inspire an alliance strengthened by understanding, compassion, and shared commitment. Their conversations zigzagged, shifting focus, highlighting challenges while embracing aspirations, all underscoring the community's renewed narrative unfolding through diligence and voice. With each dialogue, debate rose into agreement, penned standing orders formulating a roadmap imbued by vitality of human connection. Signatures and votes, anchored not simply in policy reevaluation, but in expectations demonstrating greater depth and integrity. As the session drew towards resolution, Councillor Foster recaptured center stage, her words bearing the final chords of today's symphonic breakthrough. Today we pledged, not just by word, but deed. Our endeavor shapes the future built by unity's loft, echoing far beyond those collected within these walls. Applause erupted, a wave celebrating progress unparalleled, woven seamlessly through intention and deed. A day held by those daring to turn ideals into icons of enduring power. Once again in the open air, the light of afternoon settling on the city, Malcolm stood with his allies, unified strands adorning a tapestry woven with new dimensions of hope. They stepped down the courthouse steps, momentum carried forth by the community's steady commitment, experiencing the tapestry of ideas embodied anew. In the cascade of sunlight that framed downtown's breath-stealing panoramas, Malcolm recognized the profound transformation from scattered dreams into firmly anchored reality, an accomplishment that reflected shyly the confidence of trust bestowed by all. While more trials hovered over the horizon, today marked foundational triumphs, cemented by visionaries willing to challenge status quo's collective apathy. A shared journey unveiled amidst changing tides, bolstered by a formidable fusion of lives altered, expectations transcended, and ideas artfully conjoined. Standing here, amidst their enduring canvas, heads held high toward future tomorrows, Malcolm and those steadfast in purpose and heart murmured into the wind unyielding, an oath unto change, as resolutely beckoned by vision anew. The late afternoon sun had begun its descent, casting a golden hue over the city skyline. In the wake of the progress made at the City Council Assembly, Malcolm returned to the community center where young minds awaited, eager, questioning, and poised to inherit the realms of possibility that his generation was now working fiercely to secure. Today marked the beginning of a new initiative, one born from the hard-won discussions on reform and dedicated to fostering leadership among the youth. It was a program structured not just to educate, but to empower, a catalyst for cultivating the next generation of advocates and changemakers. As Malcolm approached the entrance, the familiar scent of fresh paint greeted him. The community had banded together to rejuvenate the center, a symbol of the revitalization they sought within the very fabric of their shared consciousness. From the vibrant murals adorning the walls to the rebuilt gardens outside, it was a testament to care and commitment, a reflection of the broadening horizons they intended to achieve. Inside, the room buzzed with the spirited chatter of young people, each conversation interlacing with scenarios of future change yet untapped. Malcolm was greeted warmly, his presence acknowledged not just by those who knew him as the firefighter turned activist, but by those who saw him as a mentor, a beacon guiding their journey toward understanding and action. Standing amidst a semicircle of chairs, Malcolm began the meeting with an intentional ease that invited dialogue. "I've asked you here because you are crucial design pieces in the landscape of our future," he began, measuring their intent faces. "The issues we face today may seem daunting, but within each challenge there is opportunity. The opportunity to lead, to listen, and to define a tomorrow that belongs to all of us." He surveyed the circle, taking in the different faces filled with a blend of skepticism and hope, qualities indicative of youth who had witnessed both hardships and resilience. Beside him, Xavier Thomas facilitated the introductory activity, urging each participant to share experiences that ignited their passion for change. As the stories unfolded, the room pulsed with profound truths, accounts of unequal schools, moments of perceived injustice, budding organizations determined to push boundaries. Malcolm listened intently, feeling the power of their words connect harmoniously into a vision imbued with diversity and resilience. Amira, a high school student marked by her precocious wit, spoke with unfiltered regard. "I've seen how inequality seeps into the spaces we're told are safe, like our classrooms, and I want to make sure we redefine what safe really means." Her candidness was met with murmurs of agreement, eager validation of insecurities, transformed into ambitions deeply rooted in the soil of their potential. "We're not just here to learn, we're here to teach each other," Xavier affirmed, pointing out that communal change welded to individual effort could alter paradigms silently turned oppressive. "Your voice, the voices of our youth, are what prompt us into action beyond inertia." Carol Washington joined the circle, her presence like a whisper from generations past. "The torch we carry is not just some burden. It illuminates pathways built by collective courage, welded into the spine of progress," she intoned, voice rich with historical resonance. Their dialogue flowed seamlessly, tracing possibilities out of problems, creating the scaffolding of leadership, strengthened by empathy, advocacy, and illumination. Toward the end of the session, Malcolm introduced activities designed to inspire both creative and practical approaches to conflict resolution, a series of workshops integrating storytelling with strategy, designed to galvanize thought leadership amidst those already brimming with potential. The meeting concluded with a shared pledge. Each participant gifted with drive was charged to channel their energy into tangible actions within their spheres of influence. Together, they laid the groundwork for a future where voices were amplified beyond silence, rooted in individual resolve and collective endeavors committed to erasing disparity. As the participants dispersed with new tasks and shared communication strategies, the community center became tinged in a golden twilight, a promise sculpted by celestial witness, heralding the crux of change. Malcolm lingered at the entrance, feeling the weight of the day's discussions begin to settle. The shared stories, dreams, entrusted upon with urgency and flares of brilliance, echoing through newly painted halls, intertwined with his own narrative, transforming anticipation into legacy. Side by side, Xavier joined him, surveying the horizon where dusk folded into night. "They're going to change things, Malcolm. Just you watch," he stated confidently, warmed by tomorrow's unbridled grace. Malcolm nodded, feeling the courage seated in young hearts surround them like the gentle rustle of leaves gathering strength before a storm. "Together," he replied, the simple word brimming with unspoken solidarity, ushering them all into the embrace of an unwavering dawn, a shared pledge of fidelity, ferried by whispers of change, resonating through ages untold. As the sun disappeared, the city behind them began its evening glow, a symphonic testament to what lay ahead, not just in the hopeful minds enriched by today's communion, but in the countless joined hands they hadn't yet met, extending through shadows lit from within. It was not the end of their journey, but a step on a winding road that aligned the echo of infinity within every purposeful step, a harmonic shared, guiding Malcolm and those alongside him toward hills enlightened by the radiance of those courageous enough to dare convert ideals into reality, beautiful and true. The courtroom was awash in an intense yet focused atmosphere, each seat occupied by individuals representing the diverse spectrum of the community, faithful attendees waiting with bated breath for justice to take shape in the form of a solemn verdict. Today marked the culmination of numerous hearings, testimonies, and presentations, all converging to illuminate a path toward a decision that could echo profound implications for their collective future. The air hung thick with anticipation as Malcolm took his designated seat among the advocates, allies, and supporters who had stood steadfast throughout the trial's duration. Each moment in this chamber was charged with emotion, frustration, hope, fear, and determination, tightly woven into a singular longing for resolution. As the jury filed in, Malcolm studied their expressions, searching for glimpses of the outcome in their solemn demeanor. He could sense the weight of the community's collective expectations, an entire populace looking to this day as a potential stepping stone from historic trauma toward overdue justice. At the front, Judge Eleanor Campbell, whose steady hand had guided the case with integrity and meticulous care, took her place, casting a glance that exuded composed authority and nuanced insight. The quiet murmuring that filled the room ceased abruptly, replaced by a silence that resonated with the urgency of a future reliant on their present action. "Members of the jury," Judge Campbell addressed, her voice echoing with clarity, "have you reached a verdict?" The eldest jury member rose, embodying the collective decision wrought from hours of deliberation and discernment. The courtroom seemed to stretch time, words poised between assumption and affirmation, a silent pivot from which outcomes could splay in any multitude of directions. "We have, Your Honor." "We have, Your Honor," was the assured response, set against a backdrop so tense it felt tangible. The jury's role, though methodical, held emotion rooted deep within the task, knowing their decision could become a catalyst for long-awaited change. The verdict, considered, vetted, wrapped in the folds of due process, emerged an indelible melody that crossed the threshold of prejudice, finding echo within legal precincts previously shadowed by bias. The systemic intent revealed not just affirmation, but a tectonic tilt toward lasting reform. With each proclamation, gratitude and catharsis mingled among those gathered, simmering in a profound collective appreciation for the justice recognized and fortified. The judgment represented not simply vindication, but a pivotal movement, a signal flare of empathy and accountability blazing across the monochrome vistas of entrenched inequity. The courtroom felt alive with palpable fervor, emotions masked beneath serene expressions and gleaming eyes. Awestruck at possibility becoming real, movements nurtured into verdant fruition. Malcolm turned, acknowledging his supporters through nods and handshakes, feeling the intricate unity binding their shared experiences into something far greater than mere victory. The familiarity of allies mingling within the room underscored a community's resolve on display, woven tightly into a promise reflecting the tableau of potential and conviction. Beside him, Carol Washington exhaled deeply, her eyes fixed on the presentation of Justice Manifest, her legacy, enriched by the indomitable endeavor now truthfully realized. "It's just the beginning," she murmured, her expression softening. "Now, we carry forward the mantle of change collectively ignited." Interspersed voices whispered concurrences, dissipating charged tensions to let relief root in soil sorrowed through history. Here, on this magnum opus of judiciary, lay hope, bathed in earnest embrace from within and throughout. Leaving the courthouse as day hovered towards twilight, the city seemed to breathe alongside Malcolm, imbibing the tremor of a unified spirit, prepared for confluences, yet unwritten. Lena awaited him on the steps, her smile underpinning the resilience they shared, her presence a constant reminder of love woven into their journey. Together, they stood amidst a crowd postulated by newly certain futures, a melange of hope rekindled, reverberations of shared promise apparent. As Xavier wove through the throng, Malcolm grasped his hand, words redundant against the tidal wave of understanding fostered between allies. "We did it, not just us," Xavier replied, encompassing the resolute faces glowing amidst the coil of dusk, a tribute to the intertwined destinies, thrilling, at thresholds, transformed. "They set a precedent today," Daphne Reed added as she approached, pen in hand, reporting woven expertly with winding paths detailing illuminated newfound avenues. "A precedent that's just a seed, a testament of what's possible." Laughter mingled warmly with the gathering dusk, connected souls whose vibrancy colored streets defining truths anew, a duality parsing veiled history and free-form release. Hand in hand, belief guiding each onward step, Malcolm and Lena journeyed homeward, conscious of the continuation their labors promised to bear. An echoing harmony of change swelled within hearts, unfettered by past trials. A whisper-turned voiced vow cradled within every breath, tomorrow's assured with assurance nurtured by today's outcome. An outcome that bore the reinforced vigor of lives inscribed upon the canvas of justice extended. As evening's embrace draped the city, the air tinged with the truth of hard-won change, Malcolm held on to the promise they had tirelessly earned, a promise effervescent amidst stars resonating in exultation shared. With eyes set upon the path, unrestrained by labels once deemed binding, they walked into the night, each step trusted, each glance interconnected, a generative force no longer imprisoned by strife, and beneath the curve of infinite sky, a resolute destination heralded, a testament empowered by shared hands, clasped across horizons infinite and felt. As the echoes of the courtroom verdict reverberated through the city, the community found itself on the cusp of a renewed era, a time defined not by the shadows of inequity, but the dawn of transformation. Streets that had once borne the brunt of silent protest now buzzed with vibrant energy, a palpable sense of collective hope weaving through every conversation, every interaction. Change, once vocalized in whispers, was now articulated boldly, an undeniable force of nature sweeping through neighborhoods. Malcolm stood at the center of this whirlwind, acutely aware of the role he and his allies had played in steering it toward realization. The resolve he felt was mirrored in the eyes of those around him, faces alight with determination and a newfound sense of agency. The day following the verdict had been one of celebration, yet it heralded the beginning of actions that would give lasting structure to their victories. City officials, activists, and citizens gathered once again, this time not in solemn deliberation but in joyful assembly, to mark the formal signing of reform measures that had emerged from their months of advocacy and dialogue. In the City Hall's grand lobby, sunlight poured through tall windows, casting an ethereal glow over the proceedings. The air was charged with anticipation as people filled the space, the energy vibrant and infectious. It was here that leaders and community members would cement the promises forged in countless meetings and protests into permanent, binding words destined to shape future policies. Janine Foster, flanked by city council members and key stakeholders, stood poised with a pen in hand, the instrument of change that symbolized the power of collective voice turned to action. Her gaze swept the gathered assembly, an acknowledgement of their shared triumphs and struggles. "Today we ink a future that belongs to all of us," Janine began, her voice clear and resonant, embodying the unifying force driving them forward. "These reforms mark not an end but a new beginning, a journey rooted in equity, justice, and unity." The crowd responded with applause, a symphony of affirmation that echoed off marble columns and promised to ripple beyond these walls into the city's fabric. Standing among them, Malcolm felt the weight of the moment, at once overwhelming, yet incredibly affirming. This day was a reflection of dedication, the culmination of tireless efforts by many who had dared to challenge and dismantle the status quo. As Janine signed the reform measures into law, a collective cheer rose to the heavens, reverberating through the gathered crowd, a sonic beacon of shared commitment. Hands clasped in solidarity, smiles exchanged beneath the glow of promise realized. It was the embodiment of a community uplifted and invigorated. After the formalities concluded, the celebrations spilled out into the streets, music filling the air, banners raised high in jubilation. Malcolm watched as people danced and laughed together in a blend of exultation and relief, a community embracing a future that seemed brighter and assured. The energy was contagious, pulling him into its fold. Xavier, alongside Maria and Carol, found him amidst the throng, their faces bespeaking the same resilient joy written in the chapters they had co-authored these past months. "We've come a long way," Malcolm said, his voice barely rising above the celebratory din, but carrying the full weight of his emotions. "And there's no stopping us now," Xavier replied, eyes alight with the firm conviction of dreams taking flight. Their shared laughter intermingled with the sound of the city's pulse, unified in the resonant harmony of progress. Carol's hand rested on Malcolm's shoulder, a gentle press infusing the moment with wisdom hard-earned and joy wholeheartedly embraced. As the afternoon wore on, the streets morphed into a festive tapestry, weaving together stories of struggle, triumph, and enduring resilience into a seamless whole. For the first time in a long time, barriers felt less insurmountable, and the horizon a canvas of possibilities ready to be painted anew. Malcolm, caught in the tide of faces brimming with courage and community, felt profoundly grateful. He had journeyed together with friends, family, and strangers alike to lay the groundwork for a legacy that future generations could build upon. It was humbling yet exhilarating to be a part of something so much larger than oneself, living testimony to the power of hope, lived and actualized. As the celebrations began to wind down with dusk's descent, Malcolm found Lena amidst the crowd, her presence a beacon of constancy and love. Together they stood at the edge of the joyous gathering, looking out over the city that had transformed its narrative, not just through legislation, but with compassion, understanding, and the indefatigable strength born from collective endeavor. "Think we've earned a moment of peace?" Lena teased, though her voice hummed with pride in all they'd accomplished. "More than earned," Malcolm agreed, taking her hand, feeling the pulse of the city course through them both. "But this is only the beginning. It's only up from here." With hearts buoyed by the promise of continuance, Malcolm and Lena walked along the illuminated streets, the echoes of transformation resonating. Around them, shadows diluted by the brilliance of a community, galvanized into the future, within which was etched their indomitable spirit, propelled toward justice, unfettered and resplendent. And as night cloaked the city in its gentle embrace, the stars above seemed to nod in acknowledgement of the change they had worked tirelessly to achieve, as countless, unnamed futures stretched endless before them, illuminated by the brightness of courage short-fused into forever. As the celebrations gradually quieted, the city drifted into a serene slumber, cradled by the echo of laughter and hope that lingered in the cool night air. In this calm aftermath, Malcolm walked through the vibrantly painted corridors of the community center, the echoes of that afternoon's gathering still thrumming softly in his bones. Though the day's triumph had been monumental, he understood deeply that the path of change was continuous, one that required perpetual tending and resilient commitment. Outside the window, the city lights glowed, an urban constellation reflecting the community's enduring spirit now etched into law and consciousness. With each flicker of light, Malcolm saw the successes and struggles that wove into the rich tapestry of their shared history. Sliding open the glass door that led to the center's rooftop gardens, Malcolm sought the sanctuary of open skies, away from the cocoon of celebration to reflect on the journey that ushered him here. The layered scents of lavender and rosemary hung in the air, lending a serene backdrop to thoughts that unfurled like leaves greeting the dawn. He leaned against the railing, eyes wandering over the cityscape woven with innumerable stories, some penned into permanence, others yet waiting to be inked. Faint echoes from celebrations still wafted in the air, a living testament to collective fortitude and a burgeoning belief in shared progress. Footsteps approached softly behind him, and, turning, Malcolm found Lena stepping out to join him, her silhouette framed by the glow of the city, her presence a balm smoothing life's jagged edges. They stood together under the sprawling sky, a quiet mural of love solidified by trial and triumph. "This is a beautiful moment," Lena said, her voice the comforting warmth of home, one that reminds us of all we've strived for and achieved. Malcolm nodded, feeling the weight of the world, once a burden, now a buoy against which they lifted triumphantly. "It's proof of how far we've come," he replied, "how much is still ready to bloom." They were silent for a while, absorbed in personal reflection and shared serenity that accompanies missions well begun but ever unfolding. It was a stillness they welcomed before embarking upon the work still required to cultivate lasting change. "Do you think our kids will understand?" Lena asked, her gaze wandering towards tomorrow and beyond. Malcolm smiled softly, gathering her hand in his, their fingers intertwining naturally as though erasing boundaries between hearts and futures. "I think they're part of it already. They live it with us, see it in us. It's the legacy we're creating. They'll continue." Above them, constellations emerged one by one against the velvet night, their silent presence a testament to time moving forward, marking progress and evolution. For what was change if not a cosmic dance between past trials and future promise, an unfolding story weaved within the spaces of silent encouragement? "I know many challenges lie ahead," Malcolm acknowledged, words layered with the perspective of experience, "but I also know we've lit a path that'll guide us, all of us." Lena turned, her smile the distilled sunlight of courage sustained. "As long as we walk together," she said, confidence laced into her gentle assurance, "we'll light that way." Beneath the starlit sky they remained for a while, holding each other close, in a world made warmer by shared dreams obeyed by will, unyielding and vibrant. And as they departed the roof toward their home, Malcolm carried with him the night's quiet resolve, a whispered vow echoing through veins awakened by purpose rooted in conviction. For every step spoke to the journey he undertook not alone, but with many aligned in heart, vision born in imagined unity. Together, those bricks laid today paved paths curving ever toward limitless horizons, beckoning light along darkness with resilience earned and hope forged in hearths made burnished by unbreakable bonds. As the first touches of dawn kissed the edges of the world, Malcolm felt the world's rhythm sink deeply within, the strength of their resolution echoing in the unfurling day itself. Change, once a distant whisper, now harmonized into the melody of a daily felt presence. Entwined with every breath, he imagined new possibilities shivering into reality, untamed. And there, beneath the unfolding canvas of morning's first embrace, he understood not just the beauty of hope realized, but the power of faith expressed through collective strides taken alongside those whose journey mirrored his own. A motif eternal and brightly rendered, an anthem of promise softly uttered and fiercely sung.